Hello.
One second, guys. All right. Apologies for the delay, ladies and gentlemen, mostly gentlemen. I had to inform my roommate that I would be live streaming. So yeah, I'm going to be talking to this member of the CPI. He's a on the ground active. You know, he's posted up with the CPI. This guy, Flame of Liberation, who I actually saw from the comments of one of Jason Unruh's videos. Wanted to have a debate with Jason Unruh. So, Flame, go ahead and introduce yourself to my audience here, if you would.
Yeah, that's right. And I still extend that offer to debate Jason on a number of topics. But yeah, Flame of Liberation page has been around since 2015. It's anti-imperialist, socialist outlet on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube that promotes anti-imperialist, socialist, communist movements from around the world. And yeah, I've been involved with Center for Political Innovation for a while now. And before all this, I've been like an anti-imperialist activist, anti-war activist for about a decade or so. Palestine activism, stuff like that, going back like a decade. And yeah, I actually first saw your channel back in 2020. And
All right.
first saw your channel, you did like a video response to the debate between Jason and Caleb Maupin, in which you were talking about how Caleb had destroyed, that debate between Vaush and Caleb Maupin. And you were saying how Caleb Maupin had destroyed Vaush. And yeah, that's how I first became aware of your channel.
Yeah, I mean, like nowadays, I wouldn't even say that. I mean, now that I look back at that debate, I think Caleb Maupin I think he did pretty ass. I'm gonna be honest. I mean, like, he got really red as a tomato. My debate with Vosh is slept on. Okay, I took him to school on econ. I took him to school on history. But what I want to know is why do you want to debate? Why do you want to debate Jason Unruh? What is your disagreement with Jason Unruh?
Well, I think similar things to what we're going to be debating here, but in addition to, like what he says about patriotic socialism, his argument in favor of third worldism. By the way, are you a third worldist? I'm not sure what your position is. How you define yourself? Are you a third worldist? Do you identify as a third worldist?
I would say I'm a third world. I
I'm
would
sorry.
say the thing is I'm not very or anything, right?
I'm not hearing you too well. Did you say you were a
Yeah.
third worldist or you're not?
Yeah, I am. Yeah,
Okay, so you are a third worldist.
Adjusted. Yeah.
Okay, so I would debate him on the premise of third worldism. I would debate him also on some other issues that are maybe more peripheral, like he's talked about how Baathism is not a form of socialism. I have a 2-hour video on Baathism and how it is in fact scientific socialism. I'd also debate him on Juche because, as I understand, even though he defends the DPRK, he argues that Juche is revisionist and non-Marxist, from what I understand, and I strongly disagree with that as well. So I would debate him on primarily patriotic socialism, his criticisms of Center for Political Innovation, as well as these other topics, third worldism, Juche, and Baathism.
Yeah, I would actually say that Baathism isn't. I would actually disagree with Baathism being socialism, and I knew you were going to get to that, but it's for reasons that you probably don't. Yeah, you're probably not thinking of. I mean, the main thing would have to be the national question, right? So
I'm not sure what you mean.
when we start talking about so when we start talking about nationalism and the way Baathism rose, and just the way nationalism rose in capitalism, Baathism puts the Arab nations first, which often conflicts with us and the Leninist understanding of national liberation because they don't have a socialist line. right? Like
Who
the whole
doesn't?
reason why Lenin supported national liberation struggles was because even though nationalism is a complete farce, right? Even though nationalism is state ideology created under capitalism to control workers, which was inherent in capitalism, developed out of feudalism from sovereigns. Baathism doesn't follow that socialist line, like for example the DPRK does.
How does it not follow socialist line?
Um, well, there's economic aspects to it that I could get into first and foremost. I mean, I could quote general economic lines that Baathism doesn't follow. Syria, especially Egypt as well, even Nasser. But I would say that
Well,
their social democracy would be.
Egypt was never, just to be clear, Egypt was never Baathist. Nasser never claimed to be a Baathist. He was a Nasserism is separate from
Yeah,
Baathism.
but
It's a
the
different
CPI
thing.
claims that he's an Arab socialist, right?
Yeah, he was a Arab socialist, but that's not Baathism. That's a different topic. That's like saying that um, I don't know,
Well,
Maoism and
I could
then
actually
talking
say,
about Kim Il Sung. It's a separate it's a separate ideology. Nasserism is a separate ideology from
well, I could
Baathism.
actually point to both of them and show that both of them aren't socialists in like a
Syria
single
today.
sentence. Syria
Well,
today?
did you watch my video on Baathism by any chance?
No, I did not.
Okay, yeah, because I get into the specifics. Um, Without going, because I think our main topic of debate is going to be probably on CPI and patriotic socialism. That's what people are wanting to hear about. But just to,
Sure.
since we're already into the topic of Baathism, in my video, I go in much more depth. But basically, Baathism was the main founder and leader of Baathism was Michel Aflaq, and there was a split within the Baathist movement in which Syria broke away with Hafiz al-Assad and Saleh Jadid. They broke away, and they became basically what was sort of, you could, they wouldn't use this term, but basically you could say like revisionist. They had like a deformed form of Baathism, and Baathist Iraq became the true Baathist country, and Michel Aflaq and the founders of Baathism went to Iraq and led the party from there. And Iraq certainly was socialist. I would agree with you that Syria today, I mean, first of all, uh, it's not like Baathist from like the genuine view of Baathism. That's first. But as far as like Iraq certainly was socialist. And if you go into the principles of, you're talking about a socialist line, the ideology of Baathism and the founding uh, principles of it, the Constitution calls for the, not only just like, because the criticism could be like, oh, it just calls for state control of the economy or state regulation. That's not socialism. Well, it goes way, way further than that. It's much more radical than that. It calls for the abolition of social classes completely. And its definition of, especially in Iraq, its definition, not so much in Syria, because again, Syria with Hafiz al-Assad, he sort of liberalized the economy and he sort of betrayed a lot of the principles of Baathism. I still think he was good, but just from the dispute of Baathism, he was not like a genuine Baathist. In Iraq, they made a distinction between socialism and state capitalism. And they pointed out that state capitalism is not socialism and it's in contradiction to socialism. And that socialism is, in fact, the rule of the working class, not simply just government control of the economy. And that just government control of the economy is not sufficient. And that could just be state capitalism. So uh, that's that's basically why I would argue that Baathism is in fact socialist, and the principles are in line with Marxist-Leninist principles. You know, not only the short-term principles of socialism, the goal of the state run by the working class, dictatorship of the proletariat, but also the long-term principle of the eventual abolition of social classes are both in line, the short-term and the long-term.
All right, well, not on that Hispanic Imperialism. By the way, it's real funny that this guy Hispanic Imperium. Okay, hold on. Is my microphone fucked?
I could hear you
Play it to
now.
me straight. Is my microphone fucked?
You sound good now.
I sound good right here?
Earlier you were breaking up, but now that was a while
Okay,
ago.
because I'll restart like real fast if it's fucked up and get a better one.
Sounds normal.
All right. Anyway, so yeah, okay. Well, let's just try to stay on one topic here and not jump around. I think most people, like you said, wanted to see sort of PATSOK, Russia, revolutionary defeatism debate. So we can talk about that.
Yeah, and if
Um,
you want, you could check out my video on Baathism. You could get a little bit more information. Then we could go into depth on that if you'd like on another debate or something, you know.
sure.
But if Jason's watching, that's something I'd definitely be interested in going into depth with him on, because that's something he's sort of commented on here or there over the years.
All right. Well, yeah, I'll just go ahead and lay down why I personally am not a patriotic socialist. The main reason why is because the main the main group of patriotic socialists that I know of would be the CPI and this sort of new current of dangism on the internet. And my biggest problem with people like Caleb Maupin is their complete immaterial understanding of what nations are, right? And the lack of understanding of national liberation versus nationalism, which socialists are not national, and you can read Lenin on that and Gramsci. But the first thing I would have to say is this simping for Russia makes absolutely no sense. It doesn't serve to generate support home because everyone at home hates Russia. Everyone in a NATO aligned country hates Russia first and foremost. Um, it doesn't follow any kind of Leninist theory, or it doesn't, follow theories of Gramsci and cultural hegemony because it misunderstands what the Russian nation is, right? The Russian nation is supposed to be this anti-imperialist, anti-Nazi machine, right? But if we look at decades ago, the Russian federal government has already done horrendous war crimes against, for example, Grozny and Chechnya, where in the first Chechen war, they flattened the shit out of Grozny. And it just misunderstands what nations are, right? Like nations are tools of state control. Nationalism specifically is a tool of state control. It's a tool of control of a body of politicians and bankers. The myth around, Russian nationalism completely contradicts Lenin. So that's why I would have to. And then it also applies to America as well. Like the American ideal is illusionary. It's a creation of the American national bourgeois to support to just support a home capital, really. So that's why I wouldn't agree with fucking patriotic socialism.
Okay, so there's seemed to be he talked a bit about patriotic socialism and then also about Russia. Um, well, the first thing I would say is that a lot of the critics of us patriotic socialists, those of us in CPI, and I think you've made this argument, you've used the term, and others have used the term uh, chauvinism, that we're chauvinists because we believe in patriotic socialism. Um, but I think our position on Russia actually demonstrates very clearly that it's the exact opposite. While we are the ones who say without any apology that Russia is correct in Ukraine, Assad is correct in Syria, the DPRK is correct to defend itself from U.S. imperialism. We make no, apologies about that. We don't denounce these people and then criticize. We don't play both sides, and that's what the what Leninism comes out of. What made Leninism distinct from the Social Democrats, among other things, but on the question of chauvinism, was that uh, Lenin and the Bolsheviks, unlike the Western Social Democrats, gave no ground to their imperialist ruling class. They did not both sides it. They did not give any ground to the propaganda of the ruling class of these countries, and that's what our view is. We don't give any ground to the imperialist propaganda against Russia or the DPRK or Syria or Venezuela or any of these countries. And as far as the specific facts of what's happening in with Russia and Ukraine at this point, I'd certainly agree. At this point, the propaganda is very heavy. But the point is, as anti-imperialists, we don't get scared from that and say, "Oh, it's controversial. It's wrong to." Maybe will look bad. People are just gonna, be too brainwashed by the propaganda. No, our job is to, as anti-imperialists, fight against that and take a strong stance against that. And as if we were, as the detractors claim, chauvinists, then no, we would we would be going along with the propaganda, and that's part of the argument that people use against us patriotic socialists. Is you guys say, oh, we're not strongly against U.S. imperialism, we want to preserve U.S. imperialism. Then how come we're taking the strongest possible line against U.S. imperialism? We're the ones, you guys, that like
Just,
your criticism of Russia, you'll probably criticize, I'm sure you'll criticize the US too, but you're sort of agreeing with part of the US argument that Russia's bad. You'll just also say that the US is also bad. Both sides are bad. But we'll say, no, actually, the people that are fighting against our country's imperialism are not equally bad. They're not bad. They're fighting to defend themselves, and they have the right to defend themselves from our government's imperialism around the world. And
so it's just lesser evilism at that point, really, of two capitalist imperialist powers.
no, because what Russia is doing is defensive. It's for the defense of their own country.
Yeah, but
It's
just
not
because it's
lesser
defensive doesn't
evil.
make them
It's
not
when,
capitalist.
what's that?
Just because it's a defensive, like, okay, let's say it's defensive, right? Let's grant that. It's still a capitalist.
Yeah, I would agree. Russia is capitalist, but when you're facing the threat of nuclear annihilation, the question of which social system you have is kind of secondary at that point, wouldn't you say?
No, not really, because governments will act differently according to, uh, I mean, how they govern themselves, obviously. A capitalist government in Russia is going to look to make its national gas and oil tycoons profit go through the fucking roof. They're not really concerned about um this whole idea of like Russia being nuked. I mean, Russia has the largest armaments of nukes combined. Like Russia has all of NATO's nukes combined and more, I believe.
Okay.
So this
Well,
idea doesn't really make sense. I mean, I've heard theories that they're going to put nukes in Ukraine, which makes literally no sense because Ukraine would be nuking itself at that point. So
okay.
no,
Well,
I
when
don't
we
agree.
talk about, look, the US imperialists, they don't want to at this point unleash a nuclear war because of obviously mutually insured destruction. But the point is, what I'm talking about is not like, oh, the United States is itching to just nuke Russia. No, what I'm saying is that the United States is surrounding Russia. You know, you can look at the map. You know, if you say lesser of two evils, well, the United States, that's like, that completely muddies the waters from what's going on. There's like no comparison whatsoever. You look at the map, there are no Russian bases on US borders. The United States border has bases all along Russia's borders. NATO has been expanding consistently since the end of the Cold War towards Russia. So this is a major threat. And the United States has been building
Russia's been
biolabs,
expanding too.
weapons biolabs in Ukraine, expanding. You know, they say, oh, well, Ukraine was not part of NATO. It was de facto part of NATO. They were training the Ukrainian military to NATO standards. They're being uh, NATOized, switching into NATO weaponry and stuff. It was de facto NATOization of Ukraine. And this is right on Russia's border. So
Yeah, but
this is a
Russia is
major
expanding as
security
well, right? Like
concern.
they
What's that?
invaded. Russia's expanding as well. Like
No, they're not. How
they
are they expanding?
by invading Georgia, Ukraine, Chechnya, and
Chechnya,
I believe
Chechnya
another
is part of
progress.
Russia, and that was over a
Okay, so
decade
you're
ago. Now
defending the
Chechnya is
laws of
very
a bourgeois
supportive.
nation then. We should obey the laws of bourgeois. When the
Well, you're
bourgeoisie
trying to have it
draws up
both
these
ways right
illusion
now.
when the bourgeoisie draws up illusionary borders and they say this is mine, you have to obey them. Chechnya
Well,
was ultimately the first Chechen war was about an anti-imperialist national liberation struggle. That's what it was. And then they fucking flattened Grozny with civilians in it because they defied their bourgeois laws. So yeah, go ahead.
well, you're trying to have it both ways right now. You're trying to say they're expanding, and then I'm saying that, well, actually, no, that wasn't expanding. That was part of the country. Then your argument is that, well, that's bourgeois laws. Well, bourgeois laws or not, that was part of the country, so that's not expanding. And at this point, I mean, you could talk about stuff that happened in the 90s, but at this point, Chechens are very happy as part of Russia. They have all of their rights, their culture, their
Yeah,
language, their
because Chechens
religion,
had Grozny
religious laws, and
flattened
everything.
like twice, and now the only Chechens left are loyal to Russia. All the Chechens who weren't died.
So you're arguing like the anti-Stalin argument, like, oh, they killed all the people that disagree. The only ones that are left are the ones that
Yeah, they kind of
support.
invaded and occupied the city twice for prolonged periods of time. So yeah, at that point, I mean, yeah, they drove out all the jihadists there, but they also drove out all the native Chechens. The native Chechens went to go fight elsewhere.
Well, I mean, you could argue that atrocities and such were committed in this war that happened in the '90s, but if that's your example of Russian
Right.
quote unquote expansionism,
Well,
part
here's
of
the well,
within
well,
their
first
own
of all, it is
country, compared to
expansionism
everything
because
that the United States has done, I mean, that's kind of a not a very strong argument.
when I mean, I could list off 100 things about the United States and you would sit here and agree with me. But as soon as I start listing off genocidal acts by the Russian government to stomp national liberation struggles like what happened in the first Chechen war, you'll disagree with me because you have an interest in pushing for Russia, right? So you'll disagree with me on that. Or you'll
Well,
say,
I
oh,
would
it's
disagree with
irrelevant. It
you
was in the
based
90s.
on
Well, it's
based
not
on
relevant. People are
facts.
still reeling from the Chechen war today. So
Well, I mean, you're saying that there was a genocide being committed against Chechens. I mean, I'd just be interested to see what facts you base that on.
look at the first Chechen war where they rode tanks in through fucking city blocks and annihilated entire apartment blocks with civilians inside. And my overall grand point is that there's been a lot of arguments. You know, I see these stupid arguments by like Haas, for example. Oh, the Wagner Group isn't technically part of Russia, but like it's completely wrong framing, right? Because you can equivocate the Wagner Group with Blackwater, and I'm saying that you can equivocate Russia to NATO. You know, when NATO goes and bombs, I don't know, fucking when NATO name a country NATO bombs, when they go and bomb a fucking country, um, it's a genocidal act like what Russia did. And another thing is, you know, this idea, this moralization with Nazism, is completely irrelevant, judging by the acts that Russia did, which is my overall point.
Okay, well, there's a lot of different topics there, but I would say, okay, the situation of Chechnya, that's not a very strong argument, but we could go to another example. I think the best example for your argument might be Syria, because Syria is like the one Russian military operation that's outside of Russia, outside of the former Soviet Union. Do you oppose the Russian operation in Syria? Do you think that was genocidal, or any?
No,
How
because
would you
no,
describe
because
that?
Syria was literally fighting U.S. backed jihadists, right? And yeah, that may happen in the second Chechen war, but in the first Chechen war, there weren't those U.S. backed jihadists like that. The first Chechen war was a complete war of independence. It was Chechnya saying we are a Muslim nation, and Russia completely stomped it down, right? And it's because
And that was Yeltsin at that point, by the
nationalism
way.
is about the national bourgeoisie protecting their home capital, right? That's why they want to maintain their borders. So when I say they expanded, yeah, they expanded. They're expanding into a people's territory to which they do not belong in because they just declared independence. Unless you think specifically only in bourgeois law, which is my point.
Well, I was trying to go to see what your. Do you support Russia's operation in Syria?
Yes, because
Okay, that's
Syria
good.
was not. Yeah, Syria was not performing any. Well, the difference between Syria and Russia, and the reason why I would support Syria, is because Syria is not actively expanding into any countries, and all of the provincial parts of Syria are voluntarily a part of it. I mean, there's some breakaways, um, but those breakaways are really pushed by NATO. Really,
Okay,
overall,
I'm glad we
the
agree on
Syrian
that.
people are national. They are patriotic to Assad. So
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Um, well, as far as Chechnya, it seems like you have a big interest in that particular conflict. Well, the first Chechen War, which it seems you take the more issue with the first one than the second one. So, do I have you right on that?
well, actually, both wars are unjustifiable. I'm just saying that Russia had more justification in the second one because the U.S. was backing those jihadists,
Yeah.
and because of the influx of jihadists after the first Chechen war. So Russia has more justification. But even at the end of the day, it's two federal bourgeois states fighting, right? And revolutionary defeatism is the Marxist answer to it,
Well, I
which
have a
would be
question.
to force
Has
both armies to mutiny. Yeah, what's up?
what do you think of the um, Japanese invasion of Manchuria in the 1930s? Because at that point, China had a bourgeois government. Does China have the right to defend Manchuria from Japanese invasion, even though it's a bourgeois government and it's just bourgeois law? and the Japanese were arguing they were setting up the state of Manchukuo, which was the independence of the Manchu people who had their culture supposedly oppressed and stuff. So this territory, was it really part of China, or was it this independent territory? And did China have a claim to that territory? Or was China equally wrong to fight against Japan there? Because after all, it was Chiang Kai-shek who was a horrible bourgeois leader. Well, I'm curious what you think of that.
Well, I mean, if we think of primary and secondary contradictions, right? Fighting an imperialist power with another imperialist power, allied by or supported by another imperialist power, just follows primary and secondary contradictions, right? But the problem is, in the case of Chechnya, there wasn't a Red Army, right? There was no Long March. It was a case of a group of national Muslims in Chechnya declaring independence.
But as far as the question of bourgeois law, did the Chinese government have the right to? It does like bourgeois law hold any ground in that case? As far as illegitimacy
I
for.
mean, well, I mean, I'm not sure what you mean by does bourgeois law apply. The point of what I'm saying with bourgeois law is that these borders are illusionary, and oftentimes they will change according to whatever the capitalist wants, right? So if the capitalist, for example, after the invasion of Nazi Germany and the fall of West Berlin, a lot of different imperial powers in the West divided up West Berlin according to whatever sections of the city they wanted to have. So these borders are illusionary, right? Which is also part of the reason why I don't support Russia, because I don't support nationalism in the first place.
Okay, well, I guess my point is just that you're talking about how Chechnya. You're arguing Chechnya is me saying Chechnya being part of Russia. That's within bourgeois law. Well, I'm pointing to Manchuria in World War II. That was according to bourgeois law, but I would argue that, and I think you would agree in that case that countries have the right to defend themselves from foreign aggression, and whether it's a bourgeois state or a proletarian state, in some cases that becomes a secondary, as you put it, a secondary contradiction.
Right, but we're not talking about self-defense here. We're talking about stopping a national liberation struggle, right? Like, this isn't NATO we're talking about. This is the Chechen people. So,
Well, it's not clear
like,
to
I
what
don't see what
extent
I
they
don't see what
represented the
self-defense.
popular will.
Where is the hold on? Where is the argument for self-defense here? Because what threat did the Chechens pose to the Russian government in the first war? No threat except for just liberation. And that's the reason why Russia invaded, right? It wasn't this argument of self-defense. It was a preservation of capital in Chechnya, which is like, it points, because keep in mind, what I'm saying is not my theories. It's Lenin's theory, right? And Lenin understood these borders are just like demarcations of home capital for the national bourgeoisie. So go ahead.
Well, the first thing I would think is very important to clarify is that in the first Chechen war, it was the president of Boris Yeltsin and not Vladimir Putin. And that's one. But two,
Yeah.
from Russia's
Yeltsin actually
perspective,
appointed Putin, so
right, but that doesn't change the fact. Um, but as far as Russia defending itself, the West was indeed supporting Chechen separatism, and other forces were as well. And if we look at the goal of the imperialists, the Western imperialists, they've written about this for decades. Their goal is to break up Russia into as many small statelets as possible. And that's what was going on at that point. And even though it was Yeltsin, who was a complete puppet of the West, he realized that he could not allow that to be broken away, because if that were the case, then that would just be furthering the erosion of Russia as a country, and that would be
yeah,
unacceptable.
but what was Russia as a country, right? It was a capitalist machine. So my I don't see where, like, you're basically just defending Yeltsin's Russia at this point. You're taking the side of Yeltsin at this point, where I'm taking the side of a national liberation struggle. So you're taking the side of a capitalist nation when
Not at
I'm not.
all. No, not at all. In fact,
Yeah, Russia was capitalist under Yeltsin.
what I think you're failing to understand is that whether countries inherit certain geostrategic realities. So, for example, um, the Soviet Union inherited the geostrategic geopolitical realities of the Tsarist Empire. So even though obviously Lenin and the Bolsheviks promoted revolutionary defeatism, at the end of the day, if the Germans or Japan or anyone else on Russia's borders took a territory, that would actually be to the detriment of the Soviet Union, because, well, even though that territory was lost by Tsarist reactionary government, that harmed the future government, which was the Soviet Union, because now, well, that your enemy controls that territory. And it's not about defending Yeltsin at all. Yeltsin was a complete piece of garbage, backed by the West. And the United States hates Putin, and they want to put in a new Yeltsin. But the point is that even Yeltsin understood, as much of a puppet as he was, even for him, this was too much for him to accept, having this territory broken away. So it's not about defending him at all. In fact, he was extremely incompetent in that. And
No, the point
this
is
whole
that you're
thing in
defending
Chechnya,
capitalist Russia.
what? No, not
You're
at all.
yeah, you
And I
are.
think,
You're
and I
saying
think,
it's justifiable for capitalist Russia to invade and keep Chechnya. That's why I bring up Chechnya, because it's an example. Georgia's also an example as well. And Georgia wasn't even part of fucking Russia at that point. So yeah, go on.
well, you're throwing a lot of things in all at once, but to
You
stick on
just talk about
Chechnya,
what I said. Just talk about what I
yeah.
said, that you're
So
supporting
Chechnya, I think the bottom
capitalist
line
Russia.
of this whole thing, you could go back to the '90s and this and that, and quibbling over the first one and then the second one and all this stuff. But the bottom line is that today, the Chechens are very happy being part of Russia. And if we look at the fighters in Ukraine within the Russian military, some of the staunchest, most uh,
Yeah.
patriotic fighters within the Russian military are the Chechen fighters. So the situation in Chechnya
It
has
only
been
took two flattenings
resolved.
of Grozny to
The
get there.
situation in Chechnya has been resolved, and they're very happy as part of Russia. And in fact, this
I'm sorry,
idea,
dude. I'm sorry, but listen to how like Russian bureaucratic you sound right now. The situation in Chechnya has been resolved. You
I
know,
mean, you
wipe my
could,
hands clean. We took care of it. Like, you're just ignoring the fact that you're defending capitalist Russia. You are saying that. Are you not saying that it was justifiable for capitalist Russia under Yeltsin to stop the Chechen independence movement?
yeah, I think any country has the right to defend itself from Western
Even
imperialism.
if they're
Absolutely.
imperialist like Yeltsin, even if they're capitalist imperialists in shills of NATO like Yeltsin was, they have a right to defend them. NATO has a right to defend
Yeah,
itself.
well, Yeltsin, as I explained, Yeltsin, he was a puppet of NATO and of the U.S., and the U.S. interfered in Russia's elections to make sure he was elected, and he cracked down on the communists. He was an extreme piece of garbage, and that's why the West loved him. But the point is, even for him, I think you're not getting this. Even for him, as much of a puppet as he was, even for him, this was a bridge too far. You understand what I'm saying?
I mean, yeah, but like I'm not even like let's look at okay, you're looking this is the problem. This is the problem with CPI people is they do a lot of great man theory, and you can see this with the pushing for FDR. You know, like I'm not bringing up this argument right now, like to fucking debate or whatever, but they push for like FDR. They push all these figureheads. You know, they do this great man theory. But what I'm talking about is, sure, Yeltsin did that, but ultimately capitalist imperialist Russia invaded and stomped the national liberation movement. That's just my main argument. And you could say, hey, you know, even Yeltsin had to or whatever, but like
Well, as
at the
far
end of
as
the day,
the
they
great
stomped
man
the
theory,
national
as
liberation theory.
as far as
Yeah.
the great man theory, I mean, it seems to be you who's focusing on how, oh, you're defending this terrible Yeltsin, blah blah. Well, my point is that countries, even if there is such a shitty leader as Yeltsin, countries do inherit geostrategic realities, so that even though Yeltsin was a piece of crap, whoever comes after Yeltsin is going to have to deal with whatever situation is made from that. Like, for example, what I'm getting at is, to give you an example, what I mean is like, okay, the Russo Japanese War, right? Uh, Neither Japan or Russia had legitimate claims to those territories. Both countries were imperialist. But it turned out that actually, uh, as a result of that, Russia ended up losing territories, not in Manchuria, but part of Russia, Sakhalin and some of the islands around there. And then that became a huge problem for the Soviet Union later on, because in between World War One and World War Two, uh, the Soviet Union had to worry about not just the Germans in the West, but the Japanese in the East, who had taken all this territory. And that if they had this territory still, it would have been much better for the Soviet Union to defend itself. So my point is that even though the Tsar was a complete piece of garbage, even though Yeltsin was a complete piece of garbage, countries inherit certain geopolitical realities, whether we like that or not. And that it's not about Yeltsin, it's about the defense of the country in the long term. It's not about
See,
capitalist
but
Russia or
you're
any of
just
this stuff.
buying into liberal nationalism. That's what you're doing, right? You're talking about the country has a right to defend itself, right? According to Lenin and Gramsci in Marxism, like nations are illusionary. Okay, they are illusory. They are not real. They are creation. They are fictional creations of a national bourgeois and their state machine, right? Governments exist,
Let me
but
ask you a question.
nationalism and nations don't. So when you talk about, oh, the great nation of Russia had a right to defend itself, there is no nation of Russia. There's a national
Actually, I
bourgeois of
didn't use
Russia that
any
defended itself. Yeah,
adjectives
go
to
ahead, ask me.
describe it. Um, so why do you think the United States hates Russia so strongly at this point? Russia's not communist. Russia's not the Soviet Union. Why do you think it is that the United States hates Russia so strongly at this point?
Because when Putin came into power after he was appointed by Yeltsin, he started a national movement to where he nationalized and practiced a lot of protectionism to try to, create a resurgence with the Russian national bourgeois, right? Which is why Russia butts heads with NATO
Resurgence
so
from
much,
what?
because Russia's
What was it
Russia's
like
capital
before?
is private to them, right? So they're getting all the profits from their natural gas, and the West isn't. So that's why.
Well, resurgent from what? What was Russia like before?
Russia was a planned economy
No, I mean,
before.
from Yeltsin to Putin, what was it like in the 90s in Russia? What was the situation?
Well, you just didn't hear what I said, right? Because the situation was Yeltsin was selling out industrial capital and natural gas, pennies on the dollar to NATO, right? But Putin came in. I mean, the CPI even said that he's a Bonapartist. Like Caleb Maupin even tweeted that he's a Bonapartist. So
Yeah,
Putin
that's
being a
accurate.
Bonapartist, yeah. Well, I mean, you guys love Putin, so you guys love Bonapartists. But even though you guys should probably support um, revolutionary defeatism, which would, oust a Bonapartist like Putin, especially because it's Lenin's theory. But anyway, when it like the whole point I'm trying to make is, sure, Putin nationalized everything and made the Russian bourgeoisie really, really strong, but that doesn't make
From
him
my point is though, the reason I'm asking you that is because, and you're sort of alluding to it, but I don't think you're going all the way, which is that in the 90s, Russia was basically colonized by the West. It was neo-colonialism basically, and Putin reversed that situation. And earlier you're talking about national liberation and all this stuff and how, all this stuff. Well, from an anti-imperialist perspective, from a communist perspective, countries do have the right to national determination and to throw off colonialism, whether they're communist
apparently
or
not.
not. Putin's certainly not a communist, but they certainly had the right to overthrow this neo-colonialism that was forced on them.
Yeah,
And it's
well,
not a
first
lesser evil. That's a
they
progressive
threw it
thing.
off. Okay, so they threw it full. Well, first of all, they threw it off for Russia, basically incubating and protecting and growing their local national bourgeoisie to make them richer, right? So that's the first thing is, yeah, it was a NATO colony before, but you're talking about Russia now as if it's better. I mean, it's not really better. It's essentially the same thing, right? It's just
Oh,
instead
it's
of
certainly
NATO
better than the
owning all the
90s. Are you
capital,
kidding me?
it's
Are
a
you
national
saying
bourgeois.
Russia is not better now than it was in the 90s?
That's
Are
not what
you
I'm
saying that?
saying. I'm saying fundamentally, well, obviously the exploitation that was going on under Yeltsin was higher, right? But at the end of the day, all Putin did is he came in, he got the Russian national bourgeoisie together, and he said, "Hey, we're gonna, protect our stuff. We're not just
And
gonna fork over all our
improved the
profits."
lives of the Russian people,
Yeah,
brought
that.
back certain aspects. It's not socialist, but brought back certain aspects of sort of a welfare state to
Yeah,
the
but he would
Russian
he would
people.
use that money to go on to smash national liberation movements, which is why I brought up Chechnya. So That's what he would go on to do.
Well, was the Chechenian movement, were they communist or socialist? No, absolutely not. So it's
Yeah,
kind
but
of interesting.
Well, Chechnya is not imperialist like Russia is. I mean, Chechnya is not importing and exporting global oil and natural resource capital like Russia is. Chechnya is just a little state, right? So,
But your argument is Putin is not a communist, Russia is not socialist. So whatever changes they make, it's not that important. It's not that different from Yeltsin. Well, these supposedly great national liberation struggles that the West supports, by the way, that you're saying are national liberation struggles, they're not communist or socialist either. In fact, in many cases, they're more anti-Soviet than Russia, modern day Russia, or earlier Russia's position was, as far as
no, but the
Soviet
point
history
is,
and such.
okay, so the reason, well, first of all, the reason why you support national liberation movements is that, well, especially when it comes to like the Chechens, you can't force the Chechens to stop being nationalists to Chechnya because it's a lot like religion. You can't force people to stop being religious, right? But what you can do is appeal to anti-imperialist national liberation struggles. And those, and when you appeal to them, you could also appeal to socialist liberation struggles in those countries. But the problem with Russia is that Russia's not, I mean, sure, Russia's fighting off NATO, but Russia is also stomping national liberation movements itself as a global capitalist power.
Well, I think
So,
it's very debatable whether these movements you talk about are national liberation movements when, in fact, they are supported by the West, Western imperialists. And you agree with me that Assad is legitimate in Syria and that he's fighting against Western-backed
yeah,
forces.
but
Well, I'd say it's a very similar thing in that
Why does NATO
Russia's
get to be
fighting against
capitalist, but
Western-backed
Russia,
forces.
why does Russia get to be capitalist, but NATO doesn't, right? Like when NATO is capitalist and imperialist, you guys are up in arms,
That's
but when
not
Russia's capitalist and imperialist, you guys are like,
why does
taking a kneel.
why does Russia get to be capitalist and imperialist, but NATO doesn't? Well, the issue is, I mean, as Americans, people living in the U.S., I mean, we would like our country to be socialist and stuff. But as far as like from the international politics issue, I mean, the United States being capitalist, I mean, I would argue all of these crimes that U.S. imperialism commits all over the world stems from capitalism. But theoretically, you could have the United States being capitalist and not necessarily doing all these things. I'd argue that it's the logical conclusion of capitalism and that actually
Right, but
capitalist economics necessitates it. But it's not that's not the issue. It's that the United States is a rogue state carrying out countless wars of aggression and trying to starve the entire world through sanctions. That's the problem. Russia's not doing anything like
well,
that.
you know
So
what
to say
Lenin
that
called
one side
you
gets to be capitalist and the other side doesn't, I mean, that just completely change that's a complete, that doesn't make any sense.
well, you know what Leninist theory is when two major capitalist global superpowers go to war, right? It's revolutionary defeatism,
Right.
which Pat Sox disagree with. Pat Sox don't agree with revolutionary defeatism.
In what way do we not agree with that?
You guys do not advocate for the Russian government to turn around and put its guns on Putin and
We don't live
oust him.
in Russia. You know what
What is
revolutionary
that like?
defeatism means,
Okay,
right? It means the defeat of your
this is
imperialist
silly. This is
power, not
silly.
the
This is
defeat of
silly.
some
Here's
other
the thing,
country.
because revolutionary defeat. What is this weird like qualification where you have to live in Russia? Because all revolutionary defeatism says is that we're going to cause our nation's armies to mutiny so so they can join us. So they have guns, they have training. That's how you overthrow a capitalist nation, right? So
You
there's no
remember
restriction that we can't mutiny the Russian military, which a lot of the times, a
what do
lot
you
of
mean
Western people
we?
do mutiny the Western people, American people can mutiny the Russian government into turning around and overthrowing Putin. But there's this
So
weird,
the Western
convenient,
people
this
could make
one
the
weird
Russian
trick
people
from
overthrow
Pat
their
Talks that
government?
because we live in America, we can't affect Russia. So anyway,
I mean, this is a ridiculous argument. You're saying that we in the West should try to convince the Russian people to overthrow their government. So let's follow this logic.
yes, that's revolutionary
Hang on a
defeatism.
second. So let's follow this logic. So you think that Westerners telling Russians to overthrow their government is going to make them more likely to overthrow their government and not less likely when they have foreigners from a hostile country telling them to overthrow their own government? You think that that's going to make them more likely to overthrow their government? For some reason, I think it's going to have the opposite effect.
Supporting their government isn't going to make them more likely. It's
Well,
not like a reverse psychology thing.
here's the key thing in all of this is that you're talking about revolutionary defeatism. the whole reason for revolutionary defeatism was not because the issue with the Second International was that they were supporting, like, for example, the French Social Democrats were supporting the Germans, or, the hostile power. The problem was that the Social Democrats, the Social Imperialists, were supporting their own government against the foreign country. So it's sort of like what you guys are doing, in that you are, just like the Social Imperialists, you are demonizing the countries that your home imperialist country is demonizing. You're joining in on that, but you're sort of giving a caveat, which is that, well, while I think Putin is bad and they should overthrow him, our country is also bad. So it's basically a continuation of that, and we're actually
So
the more genuine
in other words, you
revolutionary
disagree with
defeatists.
the idea of revolutionary defeatism, which is that the Russian military should turn around and overthrow Putin. In other words, right? You disagree with revolutionary defeatism.
Well, I think that the people in Russia should decide whatever government they want. And I think, from my perspective, I'd prefer, obviously, that they have a socialist government. And Russia is not socialist now, but, that's up to the Russian people. And it's not for us in the West, especially when our country is the aggressor against their country, to be telling them, what to do, or trying to
Okay,
influence them
so
on what
like
to
I
do.
literally, okay,
That what
hold
you're
on.
saying is the opposite of revolutionary defeatism. In fact, that's
So
much
your
more
logic
chauvinist.
is that we're going to get them to be against their government by affirming them that they should fight for their government. Like I have trouble sitting here and listening to this. This
I
makes no
think you have the
sense.
argument backwards. You're focusing so much on what the Russians should do, when
Yeah,
our
NATO
whole mission is
too.
what we're
Fucking
doing in
mutiny
our
NATO too.
country.
But you are so, notice how opposed you are to fighting Russia because you guys shill for Russia.
Well, no, because
Notice how
we're
as soon as I
we're
bring up that we
against.
should mutiny the Russian government to overthrow Putin, a Bonapartist capitalist, you say, well, hold on, you're American. You can't do that. You know, there's some dumbass in the comments. Oh, you can't mutiny the Russian government. Yeah, you can. The entire
Okay, how are
military
you going to do
runs
that? Tell
online.
me right
You
now.
can
How
mutiny
how
it.
are you pushing for that, to mutiny the Russian government? You say we
Okay,
can
so
do it. How
let's
are
say,
you
for
doing that?
example, I'll show you. There are a lot of historical examples.
Do you speak Russian,
One of
by
the
the
ones
way?
that I was reading Lenin last night,
Вы
and
говорите
one of the
по-русски?
examples, bro, I was reading
How do
Lenin
you
last night.
communicate with these Russians and tell them to overthrow their government?
How do you communicate? Okay, well, I'm trying to tell you, dude. I'm trying to give you an example. Last night I was reading Lenin, and I read about the Prussian Navy moving their fleet through the British Channel to try to block off the UK as a last-ditch effort at the end of World War One, right? Lenin was citing this as an example of revolutionary defeatism because the navy that was ordered to go to the English Channel mutinied. They said, no, we're not going to, listen to your orders because it's suicide, right? What I'm trying to get to is it's suicide. So they mutinied. And that's exactly what we could do with Russia. I don't doubt at all that the Russian government is sending a lot of their troops into suicidal missions. If we mutiny them against the Russian government, a lot of okay, and another thing too is Russia is actually way better for revolutionary defeatism than the United States because the United States doesn't have a draft. Everyone in the United States military is a volunteer. Russia is a draft conscript country. So that's another thing that I was reading. I was looking at some quotes from Lenin where Lenin also supports the draft, right? Because the draft was bringing in a lot of people who didn't want to fight into the military, which would cause mutiny. And if you disagree with that, you're literally disagreeing with Lenin. I don't have the book on me right now, but
Disagree
if
with
you read
what?
Lenin, you know.
Disagree with what? If you disagree with what
If
specifically, you
you
disagree with
disagree
Lenin.
that we should be pushing the Russian military to mutiny against the Russian government, if you
So
disagree
you
with
think
me on that,
Lenin?
you have not read Lenin.
So you think Lenin advocated for Americans to advocate for the Russians to overthrow their own government? What I asked you is not like how it's possible, but what I asked you is, and I asked you, do you speak Russian? Um, because I'm asking you, you're saying that we should be trying to get the Russian people to overthrow their government. My question is, how are you advocating for that? How not how are they going to do it, but how are you advocating for that? You're saying we should do it. Well, how are you doing it? How are you? Do you speak with Russians? Do you speak Russian? How are you going to convince the masses of Russia to overthrow their government?
Well,
That's
I mean,
one.
I personally don't have to
And
speak
two, I
Russian.
think
There could be someone in America. There could be
you
someone in America,
seem
for
much
example, who
more
does, who puts out propaganda that we
you
should.
seem much
And I
more
love the
focused.
opposition here that we should be so opposed to. revolutionary defeatism for socialism.
You
Oh, and then
seem much
everyone,
more
yeah, go
focused
ahead.
on you seem much more focused on mutinying from the United States, us mutinying the Russian
I just
military,
said
Russian
why.
Navy,
Yeah, I
rather
just said why,
than
because they have
rather than
conscription.
focusing on mutinies within the U.S. If we're living in the U.S., shouldn't our main focus be trying to do that here,
Yeah,
not
but I
trying
just
to
said
get
that
some
it would
other
be
country to
easier
do
to
that?
do it in the Russian military because the Russian military has conscription. And most people in Russia are not happy compared to most people in the United States. So when they get
Most
conscripted
people in
into
Russia
the
are not
army, they're more
happy
likely to
compared to the
mutiny.
United States. That's an interesting one. Most people in Russia are not happy compared to the United States. Well, I think I would
Russia's, yeah, I mean,
disagree.
fucking, not
I
right
would
now they
disagree.
aren't, no.
I'd say people in the United States are very unhappy. People are very
I agree
unhappy
with
with
that,
the
but
living standards and the government, the declining society, neoliberalism, austerity that has only gotten way accelerated. I would disagree, and I'm not sure what you're basing that off of. That people in Russia are more upset with their government than we are with ours. In fact, the facts on the actual just hard facts show the opposite. Putin's popularity is way up, and
okay,
Biden's
well, we're not
popularity is
discussing
way
Putin's
down.
popularity. Look, let me make a point. Let me
Just
make
from
a
a
point.
factual point, that's inaccurate.
I mean, you literally just talked about Putin's popularity, which doesn't have to do with the living standards of Russia, but um
Well, you said if people are
my
happy,
point oh,
so
listen,
that's an indication.
my point is that we want to, like, Pat Sox want to do this weird thing where we have to play this game where we tally up, like, how many strikes against NATO am I going to make? Oh, I'm from NATO, so I have to make 51% more strikes against NATO than, and I have to make 49% more strikes against Russia because I'm from NATO. I have to, like, what's saying that we can't cause the Russian government to mutiny when it's a conscription based army and the United States isn't? When a person enlists in the military, they do so willfully, right? So it's a lot
Well,
harder for them to mutiny than someone who was forced to be there, who says, fuck this, I don't want to be here. So,
I would think I'm a little surprised by this because I would think that you would agree that the goal of communists is to make revolution, fight for socialism where you are. I mean, if you're so fixated on overthrowing the Russian government, why don't you move to Russia, become a Russian citizen, and advocate that there? I don't know how well that
why
would
why
go
why do I have what? Like, I don't understand.
because I don't
What
see how you're going to
what
advocate for
thinking is this
revolution in
from?
another
Can you be
country.
anti-Saudi without living in fucking Saudi Arabia? What argument is this?
How, just from
I
a
can't
practical
criticize
standpoint,
Mohammed bin Salman because I am not a Saudi national.
no,
That's
that's
what you're
not what I'm
fucking saying,
saying.
dude.
That's not what I'm saying. In fact, you could criticize Putin, and I personally criticize Putin. I disagree with Putin on
I think
many
Putin should be
things.
kicked the fuck out. I don't
I
disagree
just
with him. I think
I've
he's a
criticized
capitalist and a
Putin.
Bonapartist and should get the fuck out of
I've
office.
criticized Putin a lot for what he has to say about the Soviet Union and Lenin. That's completely false. He's
Yeah,
completely wrong on that.
do you
But
agree that Putin should
can
be
I finish?
ousted by his military?
But my point is that
Oh, it doesn't answer.
no, because you're going all over the place, and I have to address what you're previously saying before you throw in something else. My point is not that you can't criticize these people. I criticize Putin myself. That's perfectly fine. You could criticize Saudi Arabia. You could criticize all these things. But the point is, from a practical standpoint, if you advocate for socialism, how are you going to be advocating for socialism in another country and not in your own country? It doesn't make any
All right.
sense. Lenin
First
did
of all, I
not
just want to
try to
say,
overthrow the German government. He overthrew his own imperialist government.
okay, well, hold on. First of all, I want to say to Banana Map, you clearly don't know what revolutionary defeatism is because private citizens owning a gun under the Second Amendment isn't revolutionary defeatism, which calls for the mutiny of the government's military against bourgeois. So you clearly don't know what the fuck you're talking about. Second of all, um, this requirement that we have to do it within our own nations doesn't make any sense. I mean, all you're doing is not saying that you call for Putin's government to oust him for a socialist revolution, right? You guys will never say that.
All
You
right,
guys
I'll
will
be
never say,
very
yeah, I
clear.
want Putin ousted for a socialist
I will never call for
revolution.
Putin to be overthrown in this situation because that's what U.S. imperialism is trying to do.
What if it's
And if
revolutionary
you want to
defeatism,
join
though?
in,
What if it's a socialist
if you
military coup?
if you want to join in
Oh,
with
there we
Joe
go.
Biden and the NATO imperialists and calling for
Yeah,
Putin
yeah,
to be
yeah.
overthrown, that's fine. But I'm never going to join in calling for that, even though I disagree with Putin on certain things. I'm never going to join in with U.S. imperialism and trying to overthrow that government because I know that that is not going to lead to socialism. That's not going to lead to some fantasy socialist coup to restore the Soviet Union.
Are you
That's going
calling
to lead
revolutionary defeatism a
to the further
fantasy, dude?
destruction of the country.
Literally, when Kerensky failed, the Russian military mutinied and joined the Bolsheviks. That's how they overthrew the provisional government. So when you're saying
So
it's fiction, it's
which
not. That's how the
Bolsheviks
USSR was formed, dude. It also
which
happened in
Bolsheviks are you
1905, by the
talking
way.
about? Which
Which
Bolsheviks are
what?
you talking about? Because the communists in Russia today support Putin's operation in Ukraine. So I don't know which
That's not what I'm
imaginary
talking. Okay,
Bolsheviks you're
also the
saying are going to
KPRF
sweep
are a
into
controlled
power,
opposition. You might as
overthrowing
well talk about
Putin.
CPUSA. But you're literally not answering the question. If there was revolutionary defeatism, if there was a mutiny of a socialist section of the Russian military that said, we're not going to fight this this capitalist war,
My
we're
point
going
is
to turn
this is
around and
complete
oust Putin, would
fantasy.
you support them?
My point is this is complete fantasy. This is
No, it's
complete
not. This
fantasy.
is how
This
This is
saying
how
that's like
socialist
me
nations are
saying
formed.
that's like me saying if a communist coup happened in Venezuela and these were true communists who are going to nationalize everything and go even further than Maduro, would you support this coup
So
against Maduro? It's a
you think
complete fantasy.
revolutionary
There is no.
defeatism is fantasy? What about 1975 in
Well, that's
Portugal?
why I asked who are the Bolsheviks today in Russia that are going to lead this revolution that you're talking about. You say it's not fantasy. Okay, tell me who they are.
Well, apparently there's tons of Bolsheviks in Russia that support Putin. You just fucking said that, dude.
Exactly, which is my
And
point
okay,
that
okay.
the
So
communists,
here's the idea.
the main
Here's the
communist
idea
party
behind.
supports
Here's the
Putin,
thing
so they're
behind
not
this,
about
right?
to overthrow him.
The KPRF
That's
is
why this is a
controlled
fantasy.
opposition. You're literally equivocating the fucking KPRF to
Whether it
like
is or
the
it isn't,
Leninist Labor Party,
whether it is
which
or
are
it
completely two
isn't,
different things,
okay,
to
whether
the
it is
fucking
or it isn't,
Bolsheviks.
you cannot point to this imaginary socialist force that's going to lead this imaginary coup that you
That's
keep
what
speaking of.
it's not. It's imaginary because people like you will not call for a socialist overthrow of Putin. You will not say.
Right. So
Just
the
say
Russian
right
people
now
are
that
waiting
you
for
want
me.
Putin to be overthrown by a socialist military that mutinies. Say that.
So
Admit
so
to that.
so
Don't you?
so the Russian. I mean, this is kind of embarrassing. You're
I
saying that
mean, like you can't even
you're
you can't even
saying that
say it,
the
dude.
Russian
Is it
you're
gonna
saying
break
that the
your
Russian people are
programming?
waiting for us in the U.S. to call for their government
I
to be
didn't say
overthrown.
that. That's not what I said. I said, what if the Russian military mutinies? What if the Russian military mutinies? And what if it's a socialist mutiny? Like what happened in the Bolshevik Revolution
And
with
my
Kerensky's
answer
failure.
and my answer is, who are the socialists that are going to lead it? Where are they? They don't
You can't even
exist.
say.
They don't exist. This is
You can't even say yes. So
because it
hypothetically,
is a fantasy
let's
equivalent
assume
to
there's a
saying that,
hypothetical.
oh, if some
I'm literally
socialist
trying to give you
coup
a
took place in
hypothetical and
Venezuela, would you
you're not
support it?
answering it.
Because it's a complete. I would not
Okay,
support the
well, I mean, at
overthrow
this point, you
of.
could say everything we're discussing is a fantasy, right? Because the only country that's socialist is the DPRK, really. So if you want to say that everything is fantasy, then fucking nothing is real. Our eyes are not real. I
Well,
mean, you're not answering the hypothetical, dude. You're not think hypothetically.
the reason why I'm saying it's a fantasy
You can't.
is because no, I already said I would not support the overthrow of the Russian government.
So
No, I
you
would
wouldn't
not.
support the
But
overthrow of a
can I finish
federalist
my
capitalist
sentence?
government by
You're not. Do
by a
you want me to answer
socialist
the question or
Russian
not?
coup.
Do you want me to answer
You
the
would not
question or not?
support
Do you want me to answer
capitalist
the question or
overthrow
not,
by
or do
a
you just want to
socialist coup.
blabber?
There it is, people.
Yeah. So my full answer is, if you want to actually hear what it is, and I actually sort of answered this earlier. I said Russia is not socialist. Russia's a capitalist country. Personally, and as a socialist, I would like Russia to be a socialist country. I'd like it to be the Soviet Union. But I have huge disagreements with Putin, especially on the history of the Soviet Union and such. But the point is that there isn't about to be a socialist revolution against Putin. The
You know,
communists, the majority
eventually,
of the
okay, here's the
communists
thing. Here's the
support
problem
him.
with that. Because you say you would like for Russia to be socialist, but what's going to happen when Russia eventually becomes when there's eventually a big communist movement, right? Because you're saying that you want there to be a big communist movement. So when it happens and the communist movement agitates the Russian military to mutiny against Putin, would you then support his overthrow? That's my question. Yes or no?
Well, here's the thing. Right now, he
Oh,
is
fucking
doing, excuse
A.
me, right now, he is doing what the communists want. He's standing up to the imperialists
Yeah,
and the
doing
neo
what the
Nazis in
communists want
Ukraine.
by supporting those yacht
So
owner and fucking billionaires.
he is moving right now in the right direction. And that's why you are sort of echoing these Russian oligarchs that you want to condemn. The Russian oligarchs are very upset with Putin right now. They're very upset with Putin, and Putin is threatening to take over their
I know,
properties and
fucking
such.
Putin is opening his third eye and becoming socialist right before us, right? I mean, just
It's not
apologize
that
for
simple, actually. It's not that simple,
capitalism and
actually.
nationalism and Bonapartism more. Just keep doing apologetics
It's actually
for
it. Well,
Bonapartism.
well, I mean, you could say that if you want, but I think this fixation on us here in the U.S. focusing so
Oh, here
much
we
on
go again.
overthrowing the Russian government. You seem way more focused on overthrowing Putin than you are on overthrowing Biden for some
Yeah, I
reason.
just said why. Because Russia has a conscription in their military, which makes their military less happy, so they're easier to agitate. What do you think about that?
Well, then how come we haven't seen any such mutinies and such, and that actually
Probably
there is
because
no
people like
basis for
you
that?
are saying that Putin was anointed by Jesus
Because
Christ,
people
like
like
Pete
me,
Mansfield and
okay.
your crazy party.
So because
Probably
people
that's
like
why. You think?
me, that's why the Russian military is not mutinied. Because of people like me, that's why the Russian military is not mutinied. Okay, that's a very strong argument.
Well, you certainly don't help. You certainly don't help when you say that the Russian government shouldn't mutiny for socialism. You should say, I mean, when you say, "Oh, I criticize Putin," you know,
Okay, so if right here
he
and
did
right
some wrong
now I
things,
was
but
to
he should
say,
still be in power.
if right here and right now I was to call for the Russian military to mutiny, they would mutiny. There you have it. That's the argument we have here. They're just waiting for
No,
us in
that's
the
not.
U.S. to
Do
call for
you
them to
support a
mutiny.
socialist mutiny of the Russian military? Yes or no? Against
There
Putin?
is no such
Yeah,
thing.
there you go. You can't even say support. So what would happen if it was going to happen? Yes or no? If it was going to happen, because you never know. Life's crazy. It might happen tomorrow. What if
If
it
it
was
would
going to happen
listen, okay,
tomorrow?
I'll
Yes or
answer you
no?
right now.
Think
I'll answer you right now.
hypothetically.
If yeah, hypothetically, if there was to be a socialist revolution and it did not lead to further encroachment by NATO, did not benefit for NATO or the US, and it genuinely brought back the Soviet Union, yes, of course I would support that. But the
Okay,
point
why?
is that is
Why?
not
Because Putin
that
is
is
a
not in the cards.
Bonapartist
That
and
is
a
complete
capitalist, but
fantasy.
we support him apparently. Yeah.
What's that? I just
Well,
answered your
I'm
question, by the way,
saying
but
why? Why do you agree with that? You agree with that because you know Putin is a Bonapartist capitalist. Um,
I agree with that
but the
because that would be
CPI gives him
objectively
so much
better for
lip service. They
socialism.
compare him. They say that Putin is a Putin's an amazing leader. Not fucking really. I mean, what did he do? Stop Russia from being a neo colony? Yeah, but he turned it into a capitalist shithole. So
Well, I would say that with this crisis that just happened, Putin has become a very positive leader. And I'd say another thing that he did was come to the aid of Syria. That was a major blow against imperialism and Zionism. And so, no, I think you could certainly argue that Putin is a very positive leader. And if you look at his quality of leadership compared to leaders like Biden or Trump or Obama, who's complete idiots. I mean,
we're not talking.
Putin is
Okay,
a
here's the
genius
thing. Like
compared
you
to
guys
them.
can only think in politicians and great men, right?
Well, you're the
You
one
guys just
focusing
fall
on
for great
Putin,
man
not
theory.
me.
I'm talking about
You're the
materialism
one talking about
here.
Putin. I'm just going along and
No, you're talking
we're
about, you're saying
going along with
Putin.
the
Okay,
argument
so
here.
you're saying Putin is better than FDR, or Putin is better than Biden. Excuse me. You're saying that's your argument. Putin is better than Biden. That's not what I'm talking about at all. I'm saying you guys give lip service. I mean, some of you guys say that Putin was appointed by Jesus, like Putin is a saint of Jesus Christ. Keen Mansfield, fucking crazy
I think
Twitter.
if anyone says that, that's obviously tongue in cheek. That's not literally, you know. I
Well,
think
it's
you're
all
familiar with
tongue in
Twitter.
cheek. Okay, so you're saying
If anyone did
it's just
say that, which
pretending
I
to be
haven't
retarded,
seen,
essentially.
that's not serious. What's that?
So we're pretending to be retarded. We like to joke around and post like 40 tweets where we say that
I mean, this
Putin
is
was
coming from
anointed by
you.
Jesus
Look at
Christ.
your, no offense, but this is coming from you. Look at your YouTube page. 90% of your stuff is joking around and stuff. I mean, come on. You're literally saying that
No, but the
this
CPI is
type of
supposed
stuff
to
is
be suited
unacceptable. Come on.
socialism. We're big boys here, which is why, like, for example, Dutch James wouldn't debate me because we're serious. You know, we have
Well,
our
frankly,
panties in
I
a
don't
row.
blame him.
But
In the lead up to this, you were very childish, and what you
well, okay, I
posted a
don't want to
year ago
discuss
about
that
Caleb
because it's not the
Maupin.
debate. But still,
You
like, that's
in
not
a
what the
year and
debate's
a year
about.
ago
But
what you posted about Caleb Maupin, that really embarrassed, that video where you really embarrassed yourself and you ended up taking it down, you when you went on this unhinged rant against Caleb Maupin, and then someone else reposted
well,
it.
I
I mean,
had listen.
I don't blame Dust
G.
James for not wanting to
I
debate you.
just had to G check Caleb Maupin. Okay, I had to make sure he was with the shits. All right,
And
and
then of course
apparently
you
he's
took it
not
down,
because
and then of
he
course you took
pushes
it
for
down because you
Putin, which is
realized how
fucking
embarrassing
retarded.
it was. Then you end up pulling it down because you realized how embarrassing it was,
No,
but
because
someone
he was
else
actually
saved
trying
it.
to dox me. He posted my Twitter in my YouTube online to the Haas Bowls, which are like known for fucking doxing people. So
I don't
anyway,
think anyone's trying to dox you. Don't
yeah, I
worry
can
about
name
that.
like 3 people who were trying to dox me. But anyway, at the end of the day, what did this debate say about you, Flame Liberation?
Well, I'm willing to
You
debate
still
further. I
support
think we could go a
Putin, and
lot
you
more in
still think
depth into
Putin
patriotic
is a
socialism
you still
versus
support
third
Putin,
worldism.
but
Sorry?
you simultaneously call for Putin's overthrow, but you still support Putin.
No, I don't call for his
Um,
overthrow. Are you out of your mind?
yeah, you
I
just
just said
did.
I
I
would
well,
never
that's why I
join
ran you
in.
down that hypothetical of revolutionary defeatism, right?
I said in a hypothetical situation of this, which
Yeah,
I
but
say
our
is a
politics
complete
are
fantasy.
hypotheticals, right? They're
Sure,
not like
sure.
realities right now.
But the point is that's like saying, oh, if Putin was if Putin was about to nuke the entire world for no reason, blah blah, would it be good for him to be stopped? I mean, sure, in that hypothetical bizarre situation you came up with, but that's not reality. So no, I never
It's
called for
not.
Putin to be overthrown. Sorry.
Who cares if it? Who like I don't even agree that it's bizarre, because if it's bizarre, then we're fucked. You know, if we can't even practice revolutionary defeatism, which has been our
Well, you
strategy
asked me
for
a
over
question.
200
You asked
years
me a
or
question of
100 years,
whether I
excuse
would
me.
support that or not,
Yes.
and I gave you a very exhaustive answer of that. But you are yet to answer my question, which is that you're talking about this supposed socialist coup that's going to happen. My question is, who are these socialists? Who are the new Bolsheviks who are supposedly about to overthrow Putin? Or do you acknowledge that that is fantasy? Because you say it's not fantasy. Well, who are they then? Or would you accept
Well, how should
that
I
is a
know?
fantasy?
Apparently, I'm not. How should I know? Apparently, I live in the West, right? So apparently, I
How
can't
should you
comment
know?
on it.
You're coming up
Apparently,
with this. How should you know? It's your idea. You're saying that this socialist coup, all this stuff,
no. But
it's your idea, so you should know.
according to you, I shouldn't even be engaging in it because I'm not a Russian national, right? So my say doesn't even matter according to you. But now you're
Well,
interested in my say, so
yeah,
it's almost like
because
if you live in a
because
different
we're
country, you can
discussing.
still affect that country, right?
Sorry.
Well, basically, what I'm proving here is that you're asking me about my opinion on that, but at the same time, you're
Yeah,
saying
because
that
we're
it doesn't
debating
matter
it.
because I can't do anything about it. Well, that just goes to show, like, you're wrong about the idea that revolutionary defeatism can only be agitated by you are restricted. Okay, when Lenin looked at World War I, and he looked at the Paris Commune, and he formed the idea of revolutionary defeatism, he specifically put a restriction that we can only do it in our country. And if we do it in another country, we're wrong. That's what you're basically saying.
So you acknowledge. Well, you're reversing it though. I think you have it completely backwards. The purpose for revolutionary defeatism was to go against the tendency of socialists supporting their country's imperialism. That's what it was about. So the point is that if we're going to be revolutionary defeatists, the point of it is to oppose our imperialism because we have much more of a say over our imperialism than some other
I think
country.
we should oppose any imperialism. I think we should oppose any imperialism, and I don't agree that we have more of a say.
I agree we should oppose all imperialism, but the problem is Russia's not imperialist.
I think Russia's imperialist. Yeah,
Well, you
Russia's
could think
definitely
that,
imperialist.
but you've also dodged my question, which is
So, what
that
is it called when you expropriate your global natural resource and oil capital? What is that called?
well, you've also dodged my previous
It's
question.
called it's and then you form a monopoly on it, right? Or you form a large section of the monopoly on a certain geographic location.
So are the
Like
Arab
for
countries
example, Europe. That's
imperialist?
imperialism, right?
Is there Arab imperialism? The Arab countries are massive oil producers. Are Arab countries
Which,
imperialist? They
well, yeah,
export
I
their
mean, there's a
fuel.
lot of there's a yeah, actually, there's a lot of Arab imperialism.
So there's Arab imperialism. Okay, was Iraq imperialist? Was there Iraqi imperialism? That was a huge oil exporter.
I think Iraq was imperialist in 80 through 88 when they invaded Iran as like a
Okay, so
fucking
let's get that
conquest. Yeah,
down. Iraq was imperialist. There was a such thing as Iraqi imperialism. Okay,
yeah.
that's
I
interesting.
mean, what is it called? What is it called? What is it called? For example, when you invade a country to expand your global capital, what is that called?
Well,
Because keep in mind,
I think you're
monopolies
totally
exist in the
changing.
globe, but they also exist in certain sections of they exist in certain towns.
I think you're totally
They exist
changing
in continents.
the
So
definition
when
of you're going away from the Leninist definition of imperialism, going to sort of like a liberal or not even necessarily liberal, but like a generic
it's not a
definition of
liberal version,
imperialism, which is
it's not generic
imperialism is not a
either.
verb. Imperialism is not a military operation. A military, it's not a war.
Yeah, but
It
you can
can
do
it can
acts
be those things.
that
It
support
can be those
imperialism,
things. But imperialism
my
is a
point.
system. Imperialism is monopoly capitalism. And
Yeah,
Iraq
okay.
was not a monopoly capitalist state by any means. And that's my point here is that this is a ridiculous the fact that you would, I got you to, with this continuing your logic here, you said
I
that
would say
Iraq was
80 through
imperialist.
I would say 80 through 88 it was because it was allied with imperialist nations.
Well, it wasn't actually, because its main supporters were the socialist bloc, and any support that the U.S. gave, the U.S.
Yeah,
actually
but
gave
I don't
support to both
consider the
sides.
socialist bloc. I don't consider the socialist bloc to be at that time to be
Oh,
socialist,
okay.
dude.
So,
You're
so
talking
the
about yeah 80 through
so so,
88, just the
so
height of
Soviet social
socialism in the
imperialism, according
USSR.
to you.
Just a few years later, the US would coup the USSR. So I don't think socialism was very strong in 80 through 88 USSR. Sorry.
Okay, so there's
Also, at that time, Russia already privatized and was expropriating global capital. So I think you might have missed that, but that's why I say Iraq is imperialist. And then the reason why I say Arab nations are imperialist is because Saudi Arabia, for example, is up NATO's ass. So yeah, I mean, even though they may not be directly, even though their nation may not be
Saudi Arabia
called the
is a
United States, it's
neo-colony
still the same
of
bourgeois.
Western imperialism. It is not an imperialist force in and of itself. It is a neo-colony. That would be like saying that
Wait,
China,
what is
when
the
it
neo-colony?
was a neo-colony, it's basically where they do
No,
not have
what? Which state
sovereignty.
was
They
the
are
neo-colony?
controlled.
Iraq?
What? What?
Which state was it? Iraq?
Saudi? No, of course not. Saudi Arabia is not an imperialist power. It is a neo-colony of the
No,
imperialists.
I no. You asked me whether or not it was imperialist. I didn't say Saudi Arabia was an imperial power. You asked me, is it imperialism? And I said, yeah, because they Saudi Arabia is a proxy of America,
Well, it seemed as
right?
though you were saying that there's a such thing as Arab imperialism and Iraqi
Yeah, there
imperialism.
is. I mean, when you say Arab imperialism, the Arab world is really large. I mean,
Okay, so we're talking about Saudi Arabia
when you say
specifically.
Arab imperialism, I think of Saudi Arabia first and foremost. But and then I think of yeah,
Okay,
I
so
mean,
you're
there is
saying
Saudi
that.
imperialism. When Saudi
Okay, well,
Arabia bombs Yemen,
I'm
it's not
saying
so
that
that doesn't make Saudi Arabia an imperialist power, but it's an act of imperialism. Yes.
an act of imperialism. Okay, well, it sounds like you're going back and forth because you're saying that there's Saudi imperialism, but it's not an imperialist power. I don't understand what that means.
No, because you didn't hear me. It's a part of the imperialist power. You are thinking in nations. You're not thinking materially, right?
Well, it
You're
seems like
thinking
you're
in
going
terms of
back and
nation.
forth.
Saudi Arabia has this piece of cloth. They have this name. Therefore, they're different than the United States that has this piece of cloth and this name. In reality, they're all allied bourgeoisie. That's what Lenin would tell you is in reality they are all
Okay, so
allied bourgeoisie. So it is an
okay, so
act of imperialism. Yes.
to clarify, a minute ago you said that there is Arab imperialism and that these are things. Is there Saudi imperialism?
Yes. Saudi Arabia does imperialist shit all the damn time,
So
but it's not
there's
an imperialist
okay.
power
So there is Saudi imperialism, but it's not an imperialist power. I don't quite
because
get
it's
the
part because
distinction.
Saudi Arabia, the section of imperialism that we're talking about, this block of imperialism, it's not known as Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is a proxy nation for this. Okay?
Right. Well,
Does that
I
make
would
sense?
that's what I would
Yes, it's like
argue is
how
that
brands have it's like how you know, a cereal brand will make like 5 brands of cereal. That's my point.
okay,
I said it
because
was imperialism, not imperialist. Yeah, go ahead.
what I would argue is that Saudi Arabia is not, there isn't a such thing as Saudi imperialism, but it is I mean, you could use that term sort of as a pejorative, fine, but it's, I mean, from like the Leninist sense, it's not imperialist, or it's not imperialism. It's a stooge of U.S. imperialism and Western imperialism. Saudi Arabia is a neo-colony of the United States and the other Western powers. That's what I would argue, and that they aren't, because to say that I'm not. I think you're saying now, you're saying that they're not imperial. They're not an imperialist power. Uh, to say that, it's sort of like implying that they're in competition with the other imperialists. Um,
Well,
when you say that there's Arab imperialism and such.
let's say a European nation, right? Uh, performs imperialism on a nation, and then it becomes a neo-colony, right? A nation in Africa, let's say, becomes a neo-colony to a nation in Europe. If the nation in Europe orders that nation in Africa to attack another African nation, that's an act of imperialism. Even though they're a neo-colony, it's still imperialism, right?
Well, they're working as a proxy of the
Yeah, that's what I'm
imperialist power,
saying, but it's
right?
still imperialism.
Well, I mean, yeah, that's a an expression of
Then
imperialism.
you would agree that Saudi Arabia is imperialist then.
Well, I mean, if you mean by imperialist that they are in the imperialist camp, of course, but not that the imperialism doesn't emanate. They're not the ones who control it. It's the U.S., Britain, NATO powers that control the imperialism, and that the Saudis are the proxy of it. Because to say Saudi
Yeah.
imperialism, it makes it seem as though this is an imperialist power, or that, you know. Anyway, my point is just that when you talk, we got far from Russia and all this stuff. It seems like you're sort of like your definition of imperialism is very loose, and it's not very clear.
No, it's the Leninist definition. It's the Leninist definition. It's just that the the actors themselves, because remember everything is done by people, so the actors themselves are Saudi nationals, but they're still allied with that bourgeois bloc, right? They're all the same thing.
Yeah.
When, like, for example, when Trump goes to, dance with the Saudi royal family, um materially these people are exactly the same, right? They're allied. They both they're allied. Both of their capital supports each other, right? Like the U.S.
Right.
sells weapons to Saudi Arabia
Right.
and they give us money, right? So that's what I mean. And
Okay.
and like, I don't want to fight with the CPI. It's just the problem is the CPI doesn't think this way. The CPI thinks Russia. Here's the Russian flag. We have to listen to the Russian national anthem. Well, all of these things are not like material. These are not Marxist concepts. These are creations by the liberal
Well, I think the thing that you're
government of
missing,
Russia.
I think the thing that you're missing though, is that right now there's a climate of extreme Russophobia, war propaganda against Russia. And the reason why we would raise the Russian flag would be to show that we do not advocate for that. We oppose that. We oppose imperialism, and that we push for friendship between Russia and the United States, an alliance between Russia and the United States, and that with all this money, our tax dollars that we waste uh, promoting war and military buildup and NATO and all this, that is our money of the working class that is being going into the pockets of the military industrial complex capitalists with this pretext of supposed Russian aggression and all this
Yeah,
anti-Russia hysteria. And our point is that this is actually the reason why the United States is in such terrible shape, and why there's declining living standards, and there's austerity and neoliberalism forced on the American people, and just the terrible impoverishment of the working class of this country, is because of the system and because of imperialism. And that if we ended this and we no longer had this aggressive policy, or this aggressive system, rather, imperialism, because it's not a policy. If we change this and we instead had friendship with these countries, we could actually build up our country with socialism and improve the lives of the American people. That's why it's not about glorifying the Russian flag or anything. It's showing us all this anti-Russia hysteria. We are saying no, we do not support that. We are against that,
why
and
shouldn't
that
we have
we.
anti-Russian hysteria? Why shouldn't we?
Why shouldn't
What
we?
what
What's the
Yeah,
purpose?
why
What's the
shouldn't we?
purpose? Why do you think that this anti-Russia hysteria is going on? What do you think is the purpose behind it? Why is it promoted in the media and the
So
politicians at the highest levels? Why do you think
are
it's
you
being
saying
promoted?
that
What
you
do you think the
can't?
purpose of it is?
I know the answer to that question, right? It's
So
to
just
support
answer it.
NATO. It's to support NATO, right? But are you saying that one could not see their own class conditions at home and hate the United States for what it's done to them, and also oppose Russia for like, not even for causing this conflict, but for the same reasons, really, which is where the entire theory of the international proletariat comes from.
A minute ago, you just said, "Why is can't we have anti-Russia hysteria?" Well,
Yeah, why can't we? Why do we have to have one side of the coin
do you know
when
what
we could have
anti-Russia
both?
hysteria means? Do you know what that means?
I mean, you could
I'm not
define it as
talking
any way
about
you want, but we
blindly.
should be anti-Russian. We should be vehemently anti-Russian. Yeah,
We
we
should
should
be
also be
vehemently anti-Russia.
anti-NATO.
That's
But when you
interesting.
tell that to a CPI member, they like their brain it like malfunctions. They can't understand the
That's very
concept of
interesting.
being anti-Russian and anti-NATO because they
You
support
say
Russia.
you say we should be vehemently anti-Russia. I don't think you realize what's going on right now, because when we talk about anti-Russia hysteria, this isn't just against the Russian government. This is a hatred of the country Russia and Russian people, and we see expressions of Russophobia being expressed massively. And the other thing is that you talk about, you want a
I don't
socialist
see
Russia and
that
all this stuff.
personally.
A lot of the Russophobia is also very anti-communist and anti-Soviet. If you look at it, they removed the name Yuri Gagarin. This university in Florida removed the name Karl Marx, even though Karl Marx isn't even Russian, but because he's a communist, it's associated with it. So anti-communism is very much mixed in with this, and it's not just it's not you're thinking of it like, okay, we either have to have this, you're saying, why can't we have anti-Russia hysteria? Well, it's not that, you can criticize Putin, you can criticize the Russian government, but you
No,
don't have
I
to
don't
be,
want to criticize them. I want them overthrown. That's the point. I want them to be overthrown. That's the
okay,
point. I don't want to criticize them.
I disagree with that. I think that's wrong, and I think you're supporting
Okay, so you
imperialism
disagree
by
with
doing that.
overthrowing a national
But
bourgeois
can I
government?
finish? But
Yeah.
I think you can do that without supporting the insane anti-Russia hysteria that's going on at this point. And the reason I asked what do you think the purpose of this is? It's war propaganda. That's what this is. They're psyching up the population for war with Russia. That's what this is. And if you're an anti-imperialist, you have to oppose that, regardless of what you think of the Russian
So
government.
the way to oppose it is by playing the Russian national anthem and walking around with a Russian flag, blindly being like, you know what that looks like to a American person is, hey, my gas prices are fucked, and you're walking around with the Russian flag. Russia just invaded Ukraine. They made my gas go up. You're an asshole, buddy. Like you're just trying to piss people off. You're being a little contrarian. That's what normal American
No,
people
not
see.
at all.
Normal American people don't see your argument. And yes, they do. Are you kidding? They
Not at all.
fucking
In
hate. They
fact,
don't want to fucking. They don't support Russia for what they did.
well, actually, what you're not understanding is I was there when we had that demonstration. Loads of people actually came up to us. There were some, especially Ukrainians and some Russians and others, were very upset by that. But a lot of Americans and other people, and some Russians, were very happy to see us, and gave us the thumbs up and said we were right and that the media is lying. And here's the thing: most Americans at this point realize that the media is lying to them. What you're looking at is like these Twitter shit libs who are like
No, you're
obsessed in
looking at
hating
the Twitter
Russia.
shit libs, dude. I'm talking about fucking Marxist theory, and you're
It's
looking
the
at Twitter
Twitter.
shit libs.
No, you're saying these people that hate Russia and all this stuff. Most Americans do not are sick of the media, know the media lies, and the politicians. I mean, look at Biden's approval ratings; they're terrible. People are
So,
not supporting the war propaganda. The people that are, the reason I said the shit libs, I think maybe you didn't hear my whole point there, is that it's the shit libs that you're seeing that hate Russia and that are obsessed with this, and they have the Ukraine
okay.
flags and all this
So when
nonsense.
the average American goes to the gas pump and they see that gas is 7.20,
And they
where
say,
I
"Let's
drove
go,
yesterday,
Brandon."
do
They
they
say,
think,
"Let's go, Brandon."
yeah, but yeah, you're talking about the like labor aristocrat middle class like QAnoners. Yeah, them. But no, I mean you're talking about the Twitter shit libs. Millions in 100 million people are Twitter shit libs, dude. That's a lot of people. You can't just disregard a huge section and say, "Oh, how dare you, fucking criticize Putin." I mean, that's basically what you're saying.
No, not at all.
Like,
Because a
what is
minute
the
ago, I
point,
just
for
said you
example,
could
of talking
criticize
about
them,
like
and I've
I watched
criticized them
Jackson Hinkle
myself.
debunk the Snake Island shit. What's the point
Yeah,
of
I have
doing
too.
that? You're just
Because that's
supporting a
propaganda.
fuck.
It's not true. The truth matters,
Who
and that's
cares?
propaganda. Who
You're
cares? I'll tell you.
debunking propaganda
I'll tell you the
about a nation
significance.
that we don't support.
I'll tell you the significance. Because all of this propaganda, like Snake Island, all this other nonsense, and I have a video that goes into numerous things. And since then, there's been countless nonsense stories, is to document that the media is lying, that the capitalist media, imperialist media is lying, just like they lied about Iraq, Syria, Yugoslavia. You could go back
Yeah.
further,
And you
Korea,
and
Vietnam,
you
Grenada,
guys say you
all
guys
these
are gonna
things.
sit here and say
The
let's go
media
Brandon, right?
lies, and
Because
that's the point.
you guys are LaRoucheite who push for this resurgence of the old 50s middle class shit, which is completely
Actually,
anti-Marxist, by the way. The middle class is
you're,
responsible
you're
for
you're trying to change the
imperialism and
subject because you
destroying
can't
the
you
third
can't handle
world.
the facts. Why are you trying to change the subject? You asked about the
Because
Snake
fucking
Island
Char
and all
Char
this stuff.
Darling says let's go
Do you
Brandon,
want to
which
go
is
into the
just
specifics of this, or do you want to try and pivot to something
no,
else
I'm just
because you can't handle a
I'm
response to it?
commenting on the people commenting on my stream. So go ahead.
Okay, so let's stick on that. The media lies to promote the imperialist agenda. That's the reason why we focus on this. That's the reason why, and we have as anti-imperialists, we have to expose this when the media lies. You think we should just let it go? No. And the other thing is,
What's the
from
point? It's a
that's the bigger
capitalist nation.
picture.
What's the point?
What's the point? So you
Yes.
don't believe in agitating and showing to, you know, as an anti-imperialist, you should be telling everybody that you
Okay, so
know
how is
that the
debunking
imperialist
a lie
government and
that
media is
NATO
lying.
told about Russia going to make people anti-Russia?
What?
Answer that.
Say
How
that
is a
again.
lie? How is debunking a lie that NATO told about Russia going to make people anti-Russia? Answer that.
How is debunking a lie that NATO told about Russia going to make people anti-Russia? We don't want to make people anti-Russia. I don't know what you're talking about.
Oh, you don't. So you don't want to. Oh, I'm noticing a common theme where you just really don't want to get rid of capitalist Russia. Like you guys really don't want Putin out. You guys know Putin is a Bonapartist, but you guys just really don't want him to leave. You don't want him to be ousted.
It's not our job. We don't live there.
Yes, but you
You're
can
really
support it. You can
this
say,
is
"Hey,
a very
if that would
bizarre
happen, that'd be cool." You can say that. You can
this
support
is
it.
a very this is a very bizarre argument.
No, it's not.
You're
It's
saying
not.
that
It's not
we
whatsoever.
have a job to overthrow someone
I
else's
didn't say you
government.
had a job.
This is
I
sort
say
of
you can
a
support it. It's not
continuation
my
of
job
the
to go to space, but I think humans should go to space, right? You can say, yeah, I support that, but you don't want to because because you guys are honestly shills.
no, because
Yes.
not at all. As a minute ago, I just said that I would prefer Russia is not socialist. I prefer for them to be socialist. But the point is, it's for the people there to figure that out. It's not for us in the West to tell them what to
Yeah, you're
do.
just
Each
why are
country
you
has to
pivoting?
do
You didn't
for
answer my
themselves.
question.
I just did. Well, you repeat your
No,
question.
my question was how is dispelling NATO myths about Russia going to make people going to make people want to overthrow the Russian government?
That's not my. I don't. You're saying
You don't want to
how is
overthrow the
this?
Russian
Hang on.
government. You
You're
want it to
saying
stay
how is
capitalist with
this
Putin.
thing going to lead to some other thing? Well, that other thing that you want it to lead to, I don't want it to lead to that in the first
You don't
place. So
want
I don't.
Russia to go
That's not the
socialist.
point.
You don't want a Bonapartist capitalist to be overthrown and for Russia to
The
go
point.
socialist.
The point of
I told you I'd
debunking.
fuck to do this.
The point of debunking the imperialist propaganda is to debunk the imperialist propaganda, not to make people want to overthrow the Russian government. I don't know
But what is the
how you
purpose
get
of
those
it? What
things
is the
confused.
purpose of debunking propaganda against a national bourgeois government that we don't like? What's the purpose?
The purpose of debunking the imperialist propaganda is to show that the media lies to promote war, to promote military spending, to promote U.S. hegemony around the world. And specifically, that's the bigger picture. As I said, Iraq, Korea, Syria, Vietnam, Grenada, Venezuela,
Right, but you
countless
stop right
countries,
there. You stop right there. You say, hey, we
countless
should
countries.
oppose NATO imperialism,
Hang on,
but you
hang on.
don't move on to
That's
Russia.
the bigger picture. That's the bigger picture. But specifically for this case, it's important to do because the imperialists are trying to paint a picture as though Russia is doing poorly, which is laughable. Russia is actually doing extremely effectively militarily. They're using a
Yeah,
very
I
small
know.
fraction of the
Fuck
forces that
yeah,
they have assembled.
Fuck
But
yeah,
can I finish?
Slavoy
Can I finish?
billionaire. Fuck them up with
Can
their
I finish?
yachts. Fuck
Yeah.
yeah.
So the point is that they're trying to paint this false picture like Russia is losing, which is
On phone
nonsense.
them.
The reason why they're trying to do that is because they are trying to psych up the American population to think that, oh, Russia is doing badly, so they're not doing bad, they're not doing good, right? They're doing badly. So the
Don't
point
you think?
is
Don't you
the
think
can I
making
finish?
Russia
Can I
look
finish?
good might keep it
So the
capitalist?
point is that when the United States government, which has been
Hmm.
talking about Russia trying to do a chemical attack, then the American public might be a little bit more likely to believe that because they've had this propaganda saying Russia's not doing well. So the point is that right now the United States is trying to paint this picture so that if a false flag happens in the future, which we've seen in Syria countless, many times, this propaganda is to sort of paint a picture to make that more realistic. Just like in Syria, numerous times the United States claimed the Syrian government did a chemical attack without evidence, with in fact evidence showing the opposite. And then that chemical attack was used to justify U.S. bombing of
Okay,
the
but
country.
notice,
It's a similar situation here where they're trying to paint this picture to make you think that Russia might do that in a case where they probably won't have done that, which is a possible false flag.
okay, here's my point. When you guys say that we should be debunking NATO propaganda, you guys do not extend that to criticizing Russia. You guys play apologetics. We talked about this with
Okay,
Chechnya. We could with Georgia.
which specific Russian
And
propaganda do you
ultimately, you
want
guys play
debunked?
apologetics. You guys completely forget. Like when I say, "Hey, if we don't debunk this piece of NATO, yes, it's from NATO. But the thing is you guys act like nobody's ever going to notice that living in NATO countries are shit. Joe Biden has a 36 fucking approval rating. What is people already
Right.
know America is shit. It's a given when they live in America. You have to inform,
Right. And
you
we
have to
need to
show
show
them
that
that
socialism
Russia,
is the
the National
answer.
Federalist Bourgeois state of Russia needs to go.
Right. People know that there's problems, but the point is we need to demonstrate that socialism is the way out, not voting for some Democrat or voting for some Republican. That's why you're saying, oh, everyone knows America is shit, blah, blah, blah. Well, yeah, people know that the situation is bad, but we as communists need to push for socialism because otherwise, oh, just vote for, if it's a Democrat, okay, just
No,
vote for a
apparently
Republican or vote for a Democrat.
we shouldn't push for socialism because you are fucking against the idea that Putin should be ousted in the first place, which would have to happen for socialism to come in. Unless Putin goes socialist.
Wait, in America, in our country where we live, Putin would need to be
Yeah, yeah.
overthrown before we have socialism.
Yeah, I believe Putin would be overthrown before America gets socialism for the exact reason I said earlier that the Russian military has fucking conscription. I
Okay,
went for a
well,
run, guys. If I'm stuttering, it's because I went for a few mile run before this, so I'm kind of fucked up. But anyway,
okay, well, you say that you take issue with us debunking all this NATO propaganda and that we're not enough against the Russian government. Well, let me ask you, which Russian propaganda would you like to see us debunk? Which Russian specific? Because I could name the Snake Island thing. I could name a bunch of other NATO propaganda that has been debunked in Ukraine. Which Russian propaganda would you like to see debunked? What is Russia told that's a lie about Ukraine?
Russia lies about not being a genocidal nation.
I
Russia
mean,
lies about not being a genocidal nation.
when did Putin say that?
After they invaded Chechnya,
No, well,
after the
I'm talking about you.
after the two
No, no, I
Chechen
said
wars.
no. I'm saying, well, that's not true. Russia's not. But I asked about Ukraine specifically.
Okay, yeah.
What Russian propaganda would you like to see us debunk around Ukraine? Because I don't think you
Ukraine
can point to any.
specifically. No,
Yeah,
that wasn't my
yeah,
you're
because we're talking
reframing
about
my
Snake
argument
Island
in
in
not the
Ukraine.
way that I made
So
it,
yeah,
right? My
what?
argument was that if something like Snake Island exists, and then you go and say, well, look, the Russian government, it's actually ethical. Okay, they actually took them as prisoners of war. They treated them right. They gave them a milk and a cookie. But NATO is literally fucking Satan. Okay, NATO is Satan. What happens if you only criticize one side like that, like you guys do? What happens is, um, I just lost my train of thought. Oh yeah, when you only criticize one side like that, it makes people see Russia as appealing when it shouldn't be. It makes the Russian bourgeoisie seem appealing. When you let something like Snake Island slide, sure, you can debunk it and say, look at NATO lies. But my point is that fucking everyone knows NATO is lying, dude. Everyone knows NATO has been lying since George Bush. We have the Snowden documentary. I read fucking Killing Hope by William Blum. Everyone knows about these things. You're acting like we need to have this grand revelation to the American people that America is dog shit. Like I said, Joe Biden has a 36 approval rating. But when we go around and we play apologetics for capitalist Russia, hey, if a lot of people believe that Snake Island was real, that would be a good thing because people would say, well, fuck this, fuck Putin, fuck
No,
the
it's
Russian
not because the
capitalist government.
truth.
They need to go.
No, it's not because the truth, as communists, the truth is what we strive for, and we don't hide from the truth. And to try and
Oh,
conceal these things
now
and
we're
lie
moralizing about
is
the
not
truth.
in
First
our
of all,
favor. And now I'd like to
propaganda
repeat
is
my
built on
question
lies. But second of
because
all, why are you
I think
moralizing
you
about the
missed my
truth for a
question.
capitalist nation?
I think you missed my question, which was that which specific story you're complaining about us debunking NATO propaganda, and you like us to be more harsh on Russia. Well, which Russian propaganda stories around Ukraine do you
Yeah,
want us to debunk?
you literally just didn't hear anything I said. I just said
You didn't
that
give a
you are
specific answer.
reframing you are literally okay at this point you are reframing my previous assertion, which was that not always going out and debunking NATO propaganda is a good thing, can be a good thing.
So it can be a bad
You are
thing to
reframing
debunk.
my
It can
previous
be a
statement
bad thing. It
to
can be
which
a
you
bad thing to
say
debunk NATO propaganda, in your
to which
opinion.
you say that we should be debunking NATO propaganda against Russia. That's what you say. But I say
Yes.
it's not always a good idea because it can make Russia look better than the US, which isn't the solution.
So sometimes it's bad to debunk imperialist propaganda. Okay. Well,
Yeah, because it's hurting another imperialist power, dude. Russian revolutionary defeatism is literally about fucking destroying both of your imperialist powers,
Well, I'm
both
sorry,
imperialist
but
powers that are
when we're in
fighting.
a situation where people are inundated with this propaganda day in, day out, on in the news, on social media, by these social media companies pushing this stuff, us raising our voice to tell the truth about this is a great thing. And we have nothing, a tiny fraction, less than that, compared to what they have pushing the NATO propaganda. So you saying that us debunking the propaganda is somehow, oh, it's going to convince people to support the Russian bourgeoisie, blah blah. That's ridiculous. No, our
Yeah,
job
it is. It's gonna.
is to
Well, if you
oppose
debunk, okay, so if you
the
show Snake
imperialist
Island
the
to
imperialist
someone,
propaganda.
if you show Snake Island to someone and you show the fake story, right, about the people, saying fuck you and then they get all shot or whatever, the 12 people on Snake Island or whatever. If you show an average American person that, or if you show an average American person a Jackson Hinkle video where he shows that that didn't actually happen, which one is going to agitate the American more against the Russian bourgeois? Right? And like I said, that person is most likely probably already against the NATO bourgeoisie because we've known that our countries are dog shit and spy and keylog us and sell our data for decades. This was before I was even born. Everyone fucking knew we were being spied on. So, like at
Well, a
this point,
minute
all of
ago,
NATO
you were
knows
arguing
that
the
we are
opposite,
being
saying
spied
that
on. But my point is
you're arguing that the Russian flag people would be people all hate Russia and everything. Now you're arguing the opposite, that no one believes the NATO propaganda anyway.
I didn't say it. What? No, I'm saying when you go out and you debunk that propaganda about Snake Island, you are trying to make capitalist Russia look good. And then you moralize
No,
about it.
we're
Oh,
telling the
communists
truth.
are
We're
about the truth.
exposing.
Well, fuck the truth. I don't care about the truth if it means that I'm going to live in a better future.
Well, here's the thing. I think if you ignore the truth too often, you come to false conclusions. And I think that when and certainly there are certain specific factual things that are maybe not relevant to the broader picture. But if you do that, you find yourself doing that too often. You'll find yourself coming to wrong conclusions. That's why I think when you when you do this, I think you come to a wrong conclusion, which is that Russia is a reactionary force. Even though Russia is not socialist, Russia is actually a very progressive force in the world today because look, they support anti-imperialist, smaller anti-imperialist countries that are on a
Yeah, like
socialist
Chechnya.
oriented, not socialist, but socialist
They didn't
oriented,
support
which
Chechnya.
are
They didn't support
Chechnya is not
Chechnya.
socialist. We're talking
Who
about
cares? It's not. Oh, yeah. Syria is
Venezuela.
not socialist either, but we support
Russia
Syria, don't we?
supports Russia supports Venezuela. Russia supports Syria, and Syria. I would no. I would say Syria is socialist oriented. It's not socialist. They don't have socialism, but
Okay,
it's socialist
Okay, a
oriented.
better example because that's a different debate is Venezuela, right? Venezuela is not
Yeah,
socialist, but
I'd
Russia
say
supports Venezuela.
I'd certainly say Venezuela is socialist oriented. They don't have socialism, but it's certainly socialist oriented. They're moving in that direction, and they intend to go in that direction. And the reason why they don't have full socialism is because of all the pressure from U.S. imperialism.
Well, my point is that your argument is that and by the way, yeah, they can move towards it or whatever, but first of all, Venezuela is the better example because it's like Venezuela is cold, cut and dry capitalist, right? And I'm not saying that makes Venezuela bad, but it is cold,
No,
cut and dry capitalist.
I wouldn't agree with that. I would say it's
I
socialist
would, I would
oriented.
when most of the
They do have
economy
a
is
bourgeoisie.
privatized in oil. But anyway, here's my
They do
overall
have a
point. My overall
bourgeoisie
point
there that
is
they're
that
fighting
they
against.
did
There's an
not
active
support.
class struggle, but they're not cold hard
They
capitalists. No, they're trying
smashed
to move towards
Chechnya, which
socialism.
was just they smashed Chechnya, which was a religious national liberation struggle, and I already explained why I support that, not Russian nationalism
But they
earlier, because
weren't
that's Lenin
socialists.
stance.
They weren't
They
socialists.
don't have to be because
But
Venezuela is not
Venezuela has to
socialist
be.
either. Venezuela fucking is privatized to the brim. Most of their economy is
Venezuela
private.
is immeasurably more socialist than the
Yeah, you're
Chechen
more
separatists
socialism or
for.
less socialism doesn't mean anything if they're still capitalists at the end of the day.
No, it does because if you have the intention of moving to socialism,
So that's
then
why Russia
that's what
smashed Chechnya
matters.
because they weren't socialist, right?
No,
That's why Russia
no,
smashed
no. I'm
Chechnya.
saying
That's the
this.
argument you're making.
No, I'm using this to show that there is a. It's completely imbalanced. Is it a complete inconsistency in your argument here? What you're trying to make? You're saying, well, Venezuela is not socialist, so blah blah blah. But then you're pointing to
No,
Chechnya as being smashed by Russia, as if Chechnya was this socialist movement
no,
when it
the
wasn't.
point
It didn't even
is
claim to
that
be
we have
socialist.
capitalist nation A, which is supported by Russia, and then we have capitalist like we have, capitalist national liberation struggle um in Russia that is smashed by Russia, right? And the reason why is because that Chechnya interferes and hurts with Russian billionaires' profits, but Venezuela doesn't. That's why they smashed Chechnya. That's
Well,
the
here's the
class
thing.
understanding of Chechnya.
Here's the thing. If there was such a separatist movement in Chechnya during the time of the Soviet Union would have done the same thing and not allowed
Yeah, but the
Chechnya
Soviet
to
Union is
separate.
socialist. The Soviet Union is a socialist nation. It's not expand. The reason why the socialists, okay, so if the Soviet Union did the same thing, the Soviet Union isn't doing it to expand their national home capital borders like Russia was. They're not doing it for that purpose because they don't have. They're
Russia was
running on
not
a planned
expanding, it
economy,
was
so they don't have
declining.
those billionaire like they don't have that market domination
Russia
like
was
Russia does
not
today.
expanding, it was receding. It was not
What
expanding,
what
it was
what
receding.
period?
It was trying desperately to hold on to any territories that it still had.
During the Soviet Union?
No, you're saying during
With
Russia it was
Chechnya?
expanding with Chechnya. I'm saying no, it was not expanding,
No, well, yeah,
and
I mean,
that's
it
part of
was
the reason why
expanding
they
because
had to
it
hold on
smashed
to
the
it.
national liberation movement and expanded. Yeah, it literally, like, when I say expanding, there were not tanks in in Grozny, and after the Chechen wars, there was tanks in Grozny, and Grozny is firmly a Russian city. That's expansionism. Just
No,
because they were
because
in the imaginary, illusionary, liberal border of the Russian Federation doesn't make them a part of Russia.
and as I said, if it was the Soviet Union would have done the exact same thing. Would that have been expansionism in the
No, because
case of
I
the
just
Soviet Union?
explained that they are not. I just
Why wouldn't
explained.
it be expansionism if there
Well,
weren't
first of
tanks
all,
there
I doubt the
before and then there
Soviet
were tanks
Union would even do
thereafter?
that because they don't have the capital incentive, which is my point. Why would the Soviet Union do that if they don't have the capital incentive? The Soviet Union
Why would the
supported
Soviet
national
Union not?
liberation struggles all over the world. Why would they stomp Chechnya? They don't have that
Because
capital
it was not
incentive.
a national liberation struggle, because it was a move to further balkanize Russia, and the United States would have been more than happy to support such movements against the Soviet Union. The problem
So
was
that
the
is it.
Soviet Union
Every
was much
single
more
independence
cohesive at the
movement has
time than
been
Russia in the
supported by
90s.
another one. So you're saying Syria, like this
I mean,
this
look,
argument is so dumb. I
we're
mean,
kind of
did
going
NATO
back and forth
brainwash the
on this subject.
Chechens to want to form their own nation? No.
Well,
NATO supported them strategically, but the Chechens still wanted
yeah, I
national
agree. NATO
liberation.
supported them. Yeah. Well, look, we're going back and forth on Chechnya. We haven't talked that much about patriotic socialism, which I think is kind of like a key thing to this. Would you like to get into that, patriotic
Sure, sure,
socialism
sure,
versus third worldism? I think that would be a
sure.
good.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Would you want to go first, or should I go first on that?
Um, well, I'll just say the third world. This line is I believe it's in tandem with what Lenin said in the Second International. What a lot of patriotic socialists do is they appeal to the petit bourgeois, who are, as Engels said, they're bathing in their own liberalism. Um, and then the second reason is they support this new resurgence of the middle class. You have Maupin constantly appealing to this middle class. There's all this socialist, and you can see the first worldist mindset when these socialists push for this middle class, because they clearly have no idea that the fucking middle class is the main benefactors of imperialism, right? Like, these are the main labor aristocrats of the world, the middle class.
Well, no, I
These
would
are the
say that the
Yeah.
bourgeoisie is the main the bourgeoisie is the main benefactor, the ruling class, not the middle
Well, the
class.
main, but the middle class are they are the beneficiaries of, they are the
The middle
people who
class
are
has
being bought
been.
off with imperialist gains. The middle
You mean
class.
the labor aristocracy?
Yes, the labor aristocracy. The middle, well, it is also the middle class as well. I mean, I'm not talking about the middle class in terms of the American context. I'm talking about in terms of the Marxist context. And a lot of that has to do with individual trades as well, which are routes to exploitation.
Okay. Well, I would say that um, the
Also, I'm
labor.
not a settler. That literally doesn't make any sense. Go on.
You're
Sorry.
talking about someone in the chat.
Yeah, someone called me that's literally not what fucking settle. That's not what being a settler means. Anyway, go on. Sorry.
Yeah. So I think the main point of patriotic socialism. I think there's a number of ways you could look at it. But the main point of patriotic socialism, as I see it, is the point that socialism would be in the interests of the vast majority of the population of this country, the working class. And you mentioned the middle class. I would say that actually, to a certain extent, even the middle class would benefit from socialism, at least in the short term, because if we look at it, even though socialism is the rule of the working class and the transition to communism, the middle class has been decimated by neoliberalism and globalization. And so I think that the middle class could have a role to play in socialism, at least in the early stages, and the struggle against monopoly capitalism. Again, socialism would be the rule of the working class, so um, it wouldn't be like a multi socialism would not be like some it would be a class-based thing, and it'd be a working class thing. It would not be like beyond classes or something like that, or above classes. That would be false. Socialism is the rule of the working class. But this argument about how the as you talked about the middle class, or I don't think that would be accurate to say middle class, because when I think of middle class, I think of more um, like as opposed to working class, middle class being like more small business people.
Well,
Because in the U.S.,
that's the liberal version. I mean, middle class versus lumpen proletariat is basically the distinction I'm making. In
oh, I would
America, you have the
actually,
lumpen proletariat, the middle class, and then you have the labor. Well, the middle class is I would much of the middle class, or actually, I would say that the middle class is the labor aristocracy.
well, I would argue that it's actually a liberal definition of the middle class to sort of blend the line between working class and middle class. I would say that that's actually a liberal
No,
definition,
it's
and that
not. There's
the
a
Marxist
there's a no.
definition,
I have a
a
distinction.
Marxist
The
definition would
difference
be
the
working
difference
class,
between
middle
the
class,
difference
and
between
then
working
the
class
ruling
and middle, and
class.
I can draw a distinction. The difference between the two is that you can be middle class and own capital and exploit people, like the trucker convoys, for example. Working class,
Majority of whom were working
working
class, by the
class would
way,
be those
not
without
middle
capital.
class.
And basically you would have the working class and lumpen proletariat, and then you would have the middle class. And much of the middle class are they are tradesmen. And I don't mean the people who go like you're gonna get people, oh, so I learned HVAC, I'm middle class, I'm a labor aristocrat. No, but these are the people who start their own
Okay,
businesses. These are
tradesmen.
the petit bourgeois.
Okay, well,
Yes.
that's what my argument was, which is that the middle class is distinct from the working class, and that they are petty bourgeois,
I
they're small
never I
capitalists.
never I never disagreed with that.
Okay,
I
all
don't
right, well,
think I'm not using the liberal understanding of the middle class where it's the teacher who goes to work. Like
right,
that, the
yeah,
teacher who
no,
goes to work
yeah,
is not middle class.
yeah, that's what I'm saying,
But
which is
anyway,
that the middle
yeah,
class is more so like the small business people, not part of the working class. It's a separate thing, and that in
yes.
the way we talk about in the U.S. is everyone is somehow middle class except for like the super rich or someone who's homeless. That's like a liberal definition of it. But the way we're talking about is the working class, people
Yeah,
who
and then
sell
Caleb
their
Muppin
labor.
says, like, what is this? Like, why do you guys hate the lumpen so much? I don't. Lumpen is criminalized elements. Like, yeah, I mean, criminal. Like, people who live in poor areas are going to commit crime, but they don't commit crime because they live in poor areas. Or sorry, they don't commit crime because they're poor genetically. They live in a poor environment, so they commit crime.
Yeah, I don't think
And this
anyone used
idea of
such
calling the
terms.
lumpen, this idea of calling the lumpen criminals is so like it's so disgusting. Like really, we're gonna the
Well,
the
you're
people
using
with
sort of a moral
nothing to lose.
definition. I think you're using
Well,
sort of
hold
a
on, listen,
moral
listen, listen, listen,
definition. I
listen.
think
I'm not giving a
technically,
moral definition. The lumpen proletariat, like there are so, for example, I think of a lot of lumpen proletariat. I think of a lot of people in Black Chicago, right? A
most
lot of
black
homeless
people are
people in
working
Black
class,
Chicago.
not lumpen.
They are forced to engage in criminal activity because that employment is not even available to them.
Right.
I
It's
think it's
not a
disgusting
moral.
to just call them criminals. I don't write that.
It's not.
I don't think
It's
it is moral because I think it's fucking wrong to call them
well. First of
criminals.
all, I never used that term,
Yeah. Anyway, I'm
so I don't
addressing
know if
Caleb
you're.
Maupin's comment where he just dresses off the lumpen proletariat as criminals.
Well,
Yeah, if you're
anyway.
born into a criminal society, you will commit crimes.
Well, anyway, I
Anyway,
think he's using that in a technical sense, not in a moralistic sense. And I think you'd agree that
what's so moral about it?
technically, it's that is quote unquote crime. That doesn't mean that it's obviously capitalism is what forces that to take place. It's the failure of capitalism, so it's not a moral, thing. It's
I'm not
capitalism is
saying
the
it's
fault.
morals. He's saying, well, basically,
But
the
anyway,
way Caleb
we're getting
Maupin is
sort of hung up
talking
on
is by
this.
saying it's to write them off, which I don't believe that. The lumpen proletariat are
Well,
actually
here's
the
the
most
thing.
revolutionary people in the
I'm gonna
United
try and
States.
get
So,
into this. Well,
yes.
I would disagree. My understanding is that the Marxist understanding of the lumpen proletariat is that they could go either way. There isn't necessarily a guarantee that they will be revolutionaries. In fact, they could be hired by the ruling class. They could
I
go
when
either
did
way
I
because
never
of
what?
being in such desperation that the ruling class making an offer to them to be soldiers for the ruling class could be very appealing. So they could go either way. And this idea
Yeah, I
that
mean that
they will be
happened,
the
but
only ones.
anyone could be a soldier of the working class. Yeah, that I agree with that, but the
No, I was saying
idea
ruling
is
class, but yeah.
who has okay, the idea of third worldism is who has the most revolutionary potential. The CPI thinks it's these small business owner middle class people.
Wrong, wrong.
These yes,
You're
yes they do.
wrong. That is
They
not
do.
what we say.
Then why do
That's
they
completely
support
wrong. And I'll
then why do they
clarify
support
right
the
now
trucker protests?
because I'm a member of CPI. So you could say that we say this, but that's completely wrong. We haven't I think I gave and there's different views within CPI. But generally what I say and others say the general idea is that socialism is the rule of the working class and that these other elements, maybe elements of the middle class, could play a role, but that is not the primary role. Socialism is the working class. It is the rule of the working class and is class struggle is what it is. So I would like to see anywhere where you could find someone saying that socialism is the middle class or it's all about the middle class
Look at
or
the
that
trucker convoy. Look at the trucker convoy protest.
most of
And then
them
you
are
have
workers.
completely
They're
misinformed
workers.
people like this banana mapping and gaming guy who says that truckers don't even own their own businesses. How do you think local and family trucking businesses are started, dude? Do they come
Well, I
out of
think
thin
it
air?
varies from type to type, but a lot are wage laborers that don't own any means of
Nope.
production.
Nope. I actually made a video addressing this a couple days ago. All of those trucks there are actually private property that are owned by petty bourgeois owner operators. They're not company vehicles.
Not
And
necessarily by the drivers, but
even
by
if
a company that they work for.
even if working class truckers, well, they worked for, that's the capitalist argument, right? They worked. Jeff Bezos worked for Amazon, so he deserves to have Amazon, right?
Are
That's the
they
capitalist
still
argument, but they exploit people in their businesses.
are they selling their labor to a employer?
No, they're not. They own their own trucking businesses. Those truckers that pull up with their trucks, they own their own trucking. They own those trucks, and those trucks are their capital.
So
That's
you're
their
saying
private
that all
property.
of those that's the case with all of those truckers. I don't think that's the case. I
Yes,
think
it
it's a
is.
mix of people.
Okay, so answer this then. How is it possible that a employee, okay, a very big trucking company in the US is Schneider National, right? If I am an employee of Schneider National, how am I going to steal a Schneider National truck and pull up to the trucking convoy protest with my company truck? That's not going to happen. All of those trucks there are private property.
Well, here's how.
Period. They're all owned by
Here's
petite bourgeois business owners, and everyone shills for them. Caleb Maupin goes on his stream and he says, "Oh, we have these working class truckers. They are not working
He's
class
right.
because they own their
And I
own
agree.
private property,
No, he happens to be
and
right, and that
they
and that
employ employees and they exploit them.
and that
That's just the reality of
well,
business."
well, maybe some of them, but you throw a lot of things in there. And actually, no, Caleb Maupin's correct on that, and that's I agree with
Every
that
time
position.
you talk to
And
a person at the protest,
hang on.
yeah. Oh,
So yeah,
Go ahead.
so the other point, your first point though, about how could they do this, blah blah. Well, it's a mix of people there, and I'm sure a lot of them are as you described. But you're asking, oh, how could they do this? Well, truckers they're on the road for huge amounts of time, and so you could be passing by and participate in it for a period of time, and there's massive
No, you
amounts of
couldn't.
truckers. So
Your
yeah, you could.
trucking company. Oh, okay. So you're trucking. You're saying that a company like Schneider or CR England or whatever is going to say, "Hey, buddy, you know how you're supposed to be hauling ass 500 miles every single day, 11 hours a day? They're just going to stop their 11-hour drive. You know, truckers drive
Yeah,
for
you could
11
stop there
hours straight,
briefly.
except for a 30-minute break and a 10-minute break. They're not going
Yeah,
to stop at a protest, dude. All of those trucks there are private property owned by petite bourgeois truck owners. They're not company trucks.
and even the ones I'm not like an expert on how trucking works, but from what I understand, just because you own a truck doesn't mean that you're a business owner. You could be using your truck for various other companies, and you're
Yeah,
not
no, but you're
hiring
owner of
anyone.
you own private property. And
So
then what
is
happens
your
after that
car?
is after you own your own truck, typically, okay, and another thing is keep in mind, these guys who own their own trucks, oh, they're poor working class people. These
So
guys
if
are
you own a
pulling in
car,
$300,000 to $700,000 a year.
So if you
three
own a
to seven
car,
hundred thousand dollars. Go to any truck stop and ask them how much does an owner operator make.
the amount of money you make does not define whether you're a member of the working class or not. What
No,
defines
but
it
they
is your
use this
relation
capital
to
that they
production,
have
whether
to
you are an
employ
employer or an
employees.
employee.
That
That
is
is what
how a
defines,
family
not your
trucking
salary.
business starts.
That's the liberal definition. The liberal
No, it's
definition
not.
looks at
Okay,
the
so
salary.
let's say I have
The
private property,
Marxist
right?
definition is relations to production,
Yes, and their
whether you're an
relation to
employer or
production is they
employee.
are a
So
private property owner who can employ employees. That is their relation to production. They are petit bourgeois. They're small business owners.
I don't
They're
think
not the
most of these
revolutionary
truckers
class in
employ
America.
employees. For example, if you're an you're an Uber driver, right?
Doesn't
And you
apply here.
own, if you own a car and you're an Uber driver,
That doesn't apply
you're
here.
still a worker because
You
you're
want to know why
working
that doesn't
for a bigger
apply? It's
company.
because you want to know why that doesn't apply. It's because trucks are 100% solely capital by law. You cannot take a truck out unless you have approval. Cars are personal vehicles. Okay, cars are personal vehicles that Uber drivers are forced to contract out. An Uber driver is forced by capitalism to contract his
It's a
personal
very
car out to
similar
strangers.
it's a
But a
very similar
trucker buys
situation
a
though.
truck specifically for the truck is 100% only private property and it's marked by the Department of Transportation. A car is not. So that's
Okay,
the
but
difference. They're not Uber drivers.
it's a very similar situation. And the point is, you're trying to say, oh, they're all no, loads of those people probably don't employ anyone. In fact, I don't know how you would say that they all do, or in fact
My
even a
point is that
majority of them
every
do.
single truck there, look at all of those trucks that are blocking the roads and blocking the ports in Canada, etc. All of those trucks there are private property. That's the point. So we're bowing down and we're kneeling for the petit bourgeois. See,
No,
people
no,
say that
they're
I'm
working
not connected
class.
to the working class, but I know more about working class industries than they do because they're all fucking academics, where I'm actually a
No.
working class person.
Well, so is pretty much everyone in CPI, including myself. But that's besides
Well,
the
apparently
point.
not working class enough to know like a job that employs like 7 million people or whatever. I think
Well,
it's 3
actually,
million
we
now.
do. We actually, Dust James is a trucker, and I'm sure he knows way more about it
Yeah,
than
and
we
Dust
do.
James refused to debate me and ran
Me
away from my
personally,
criticisms of his talk. So,
I'm not a trucker, so I'm not an expert on that field of work.
well,
But
go ahead and ask Dust James that
my
because he'll
point
scratch
is
his fucking
though,
head.
that you're talking about this as if these are all. No, most of those people don't employ anyone, and in fact, they are workers because they are employees.
What do you
Some of them
mean?
maybe are small business
Most of
people
those
who
people don't employ anyone. Do you know how many people pull up to the protests with family truck businesses? A family truck business is
yeah,
a
I'm sure they
is
are.
a
I'm sure those
petite
people are
bourgeois
there,
exploitative business.
and as I
And
said
another
earlier,
thing is, okay, listen. Here's the reason. Here's another reason why I believe that these are all rich. That these people all employ, because
they
they
don't
have
all
been
employ,
going around driving
and
on
I don't know
hundreds
what you're
of gallons
basing
of
that off of.
diesel. It's only. I'm trying to finish my point. They're going around on driving on hundreds of gallons of diesel. The only logical way that they could keep themselves afloat, and in some cases donate over $5,000 to the convoy, is if they have a fleet, right? Capital likes to multiply itself when you get more of it. When you get $500, that tends to multiply to 100 if you have a business, right? So they are expropriating more capital. They are exploiting more workers. Some dumbass says it's, oh, these truckers, these private property owning truckers that own their own family trucking business, employ truckers who don't have their own trucks and exploit the shit out of them with cents per mile and not allowing detention pay and all these other aspects. When they do this, they are owning the means of production. No. If
Well,
these truckers were good, they would
you're
pay detention
yeah,
pay
yeah.
anyway.
Here's the thing. I'm sure that obviously a lot of people involved with it are small business, and some maybe even big business, but a lot of them are working class, and they represent a working class demand. And here's the other thing: you're acting like, oh, because there's petty bourgeois, middle class people involved, that somehow discredits it. No, from what I said, the working class can have an alliance with sections of the middle class against the bourgeoisie. And this is what we see right here. Even if it was, as you were arguing, all petty bourgeoisie, middle class people, and so on, that would actually be a strong argument for alliance with the middle class because look how hard the state is coming down on them. The state is coming down hard on them, way harder than the Canadian government is not going after leftist groups
Okay.
the way they are against these truckers, shutting down their banks doing these emergency laws and all this stuff. The ruling class is these people are standing up against the ruling class, and the ruling class is trying to
All
crush
right,
them.
listen. Here's the reason why I disagree with supporting with those petite bourgeois truckers. The reason why is because they are upset that the neoliberal government in Canada fucked up global trade by making the barrier of entry to trade way too high. Now all of a sudden you need to have 3 vaccines plus a booster plus a immunization plus a passport, right? And these people believe that the vaccine is harmful. So these people are not upset because of capital. These people are not upset. These people are upset because the flow of global capital has been halted.
Well, I don't know if
These
you've been
people
seeing the
are
arguments they
upset
make.
because capital cannot flow. If you go and try to
They're
ally
also
with these
upset about
people, they're going to say, hey, I
surveillance
want to
that's
make more
going
money. I
on.
want to get richer.
The vaccine passports. Are you familiar with the vaccine passports? In fact, from what I understand, that's the biggest demand. This mass surveillance, which we should
Yes,
oppose.
the
I think
the
you
the
would you
vaccine
would
pass.
want to
I
oppose
think
that. No,
socialists need to support. Here's why socialists need to support the vaccine passports as well as conscription is
no, you're
because
not
it.
supposed to support that. That's mass
Yes, you are.
surveillance. Do
Listen,
you
it's
know? Do you
because
have any
it's
idea what they're
because
doing with these vaccine
it's be
passports? This
it's
is
because yes, it's a good thing. I'll explain why it's a good thing,
no, it's
right?
not, because
Yes, it is. You're not
it
letting me
is
talk.
without
Let me
consent. It
explain.
is without consent
Hello.
extracting all this information from working class from people. So how
Can
are
I
you in
explain
favor
why
of
it's
the
good?
state without consent gathering all this information from the people? I
Work.
don't.
Okay,
That doesn't
vaccine.
make any
Yeah, you're
sense.
you're literally just talking. Vaccine passports. What else do I like? Conscript. What support. I'll say not like. I
Well,
don't
we're not
like
going
vaccine
down a list
passports,
of
but I'll talk. You're fucking talking over me.
all of these things.
Like
Just stick to the point of the vaccine
I'm
passports. You don't
trying
need to
to
get
give
into all
you
this
my
other
bro.
stuff.
I'm trying to tell you. Okay, so the vaccine passport. The reason why I support the vaccine passport is because it disrupts global capital and it causes the US to go into crisis, which is when the US military could mutiny, or even all the Second Amendment owners and all of the workers in the United States, if there is a capitalist crisis. Because remember, capitalism is a machine of global capital flowing, right? It's like, think of capitalism like a pipeline, right? If you have no vaccine passports, if you have no conscription, if you have none of these filters to global trade, um, then the pipeline of capitalism is just going to keep flowing. Capital is going to keep flowing. When you introduce um, like vaccine passports, it causes a disruption in the global capitalist supply pipeline, which is good for us because that causes crisis, which means that we can agitate the working class to have revolution. That's why I support it.
Okay, so you're saying that the vaccine passports disrupt global capitalism. That's what you're saying.
Yes, that's why I support it.
Okay,
We
so
don't like when
the
global
hang
capital
on. No,
flows.
I was just
Yes,
getting
I'm
your
just finishing.
position
Sorry.
to respond to it. So you're saying that it disrupts global capitalism. So I guess the richest of the rich, Bill Gates, all of these people, all of these top billionaires that support these vaccine passports, the Canadian government, they somehow want to disrupt capitalism? No, it's because their vision of capitalism is through mass surveillance and mass control through these things. This idea that somehow the Canadian government and Bill Gates and all these billionaires are pushing for something that is anti-capitalist is absurd.
No, but the reason, like, why are you talking about Bill Gates? You're not
He's
negating
one of
what
the
I just
big
said.
billionaires that supports it, and he's the biggest landowner in
Okay,
the
well, a
United
billionaire
States,
can
so he's
also like
relevant to
jump off a
this.
cliff. If a billionaire supports disrupting the international global pipeline of goods, then yeah, I support that billionaire as well.
Okay, yeah, well, I think
Let's say
you're
George Soros came out and he
so you're
said,
gonna so
if you want to cross the border
yeah,
to trade, you need
so
to
you're gonna
be at
side
least 6 feet
with
5 inches tall, right?
so you're gonna
That would
side
be
with
a
the
great
state.
policy because like 99% of the population couldn't trade, which would destroy capitalism.
Okay, well, you're willing to side with the state and the richest of the rich against these evil middle
Well, you're willing to
class
side
petty
with Russia and
bourgeois.
Russian billionaires, so go the
No, no,
fuck ahead.
let's stick with the topic, not go
Oh, we
back
got to
to
stick with the
Russia.
topic here. Okay, yeah.
Well,
When
yeah,
you do
because
it,
we
it's
can only
fine.
argue with one thing at a time. Well, I
Also,
mean,
this
yeah,
is
if you
not
want to respond,
accelerationism.
yeah.
That's not accelerationism.
So these truckers, who I say many of them are working class. You say they're all petty bourgeois. I say it's a mix of people, including many working class people. You're saying that they're totally legitimate because they're all middle class, but that the state, the Canadian state, the imperialist Canadian state, which is pushing this policy along with the richest of the rich, capitalist billionaires. And somehow what they're pushing is positive, but these people, these truckers, are somehow
These petit
completely in the
bourgeois
wrong.
people, yeah.
So the petty bourgeois, who you label, I don't agree. I say they're
Well,
largely
I
working
basically
class, some
explained that
not.
every trucker there with the truck is
But let's
petit
use your
bourgeois.
argument. These, in your view, these petty bourgeois people are worse than the biggest bourgeoisie and the imperialist capitalist state.
Yes,
That's
because
interesting.
yes, and I'll explain why. Because the petit bourgeois people, they don't care about anyone except for themselves. They just want the pipeline to keep going. They just want to make more fucking money. If George Soros or whoever came out, if a billionaire came out and said, hey, you know what? Like I said, the example of 6'5", it would disrupt global trade, and it would show I'm not practicing this is not accelerationism. Okay, this is this is capitalism in crisis, which is what Marx said would happen. Marx did not say that the transition to socialism would be pretty happy in rainbows. Revolution
Well,
is
I
not a
think
dinner party, as Mao
I
said.
think what you're not realizing is that there's a reason why the richest of the rich push these policies, and there's a reason why the imperialist state pushes these policies, which is that they want it because they have a strategy here, which is to their benefit, and that you're going along with it because you say, "Oh, these petty bourgeois, these small business people, they're so horrible. They only care about themselves." I think you're missing the point, which is that these murderous imperialists and these murderous billionaires, monopolists, the richest of the rich, they're pushing this policy not because they care about the public, not because they're generous, but because it fits their interests for maintaining and furthering their system.
Yeah, disrupting the pipeline of global capital and causing a massive protest to happen is in there. Look, if the capitalists want to destroy capitalism, like you're saying they are, then go the fuck ahead. The pipeline, it needs to be blocked. Like, do you not agree that global capital needs to stop flowing? Do you agree? Yes or no?
Well, that's a
Global
very broad.
capital needs to stop flowing. It's not broad. There is a port that the truckers are blocking. This
What do you
is
mean
a
by global
pipeline of
capital?
global capital.
What
If
do you
they
mean by
block it, that is a
hang on,
good
hang on.
thing.
What do you mean by global capital? You mean like the products and stuff that people are transporting? Products need to stop traveling across borders? That need to stop?
Well, it's not just, well, products is one part, finance capital,
They're not transporting
industrial
finance
capital.
capital, from what I understand.
Wait, what?
They're not transporting finance capital in their trucks, from what I understand. From what I understand, they're transporting food and products and such.
Yeah, but that's part of the global capitalist supply chain. When you go buy food or drinks at the store, you're still buying the products of exploitation,
Yeah,
right?
I don't think
That's why there's
I.
no ethical consumption.
Okay, so I'll say I don't think that the transport of food and stuff should stop. Do you want to starve to death? No, I don't think so. I
People in
don't think
Canada
I
are
don't
going to
think we want.
starve to death. No, no one's going to starve to death, especially not in America. When we
So you're
disrupt it, when we clog the pipeline of global capitalism, we Caleb Maupin is straw manning me saying that I want everyone to be unemployed and suffer. No, but it would cause a crisis which would create class consciousness. People didn't become socialists because everything was perfect. Think about the 1980s. Think about how growth was exploding in the 1980s. Did anyone want to be socialist then? No, because the neoliberal pipeline was fucking
well. Look,
booming. But now
you
it's not. That's a good thing it's
you're
not.
you're um you're decrying people calling you an accelerationist, but this is the accelerate. I mean, you have
No,
to
it's
admit this
not.
is
No, it's not. No, it's
it
not.
is
Capitalism
because
capitalism has to go
you
through
are
crisis.
arguing that things need to get
So
way
what should we do?
worse
So
for
what
there
should
to
we do?
be.
If we are not going to
It is,
agitate
and
and
that's not
if we are not
that's
going
not.
to
You
break
shouldn't take that as
down
a
the
pejorative. You
global
should just
trade, then
accept
should we
that
just
as
wait
and be
around for
proud
it to
of it.
break down itself?
What's that? What should
If
we
we are
do?
not going to if we are not going to attempt to even partly disrupt the capitalist global pipeline, what are we supposed to do? Just wait around for it to go down?
No, I think there needs to be disruptions in the sense of strikes. We
That's
certainly
what
need a
that's what the
massive
vaccine
upsurge of
pipeline did. It
strikes.
disrupted capital. That's my
But
point.
when the truckers basically did a sort of strike, they went on protest. You oppose it, you know.
No, I think
That's what we
them.
need more of that. We need
I
more
think
of what the
them.
truckers are doing
I think
across
the
the
act.
working class as a whole. We
I
don't
think
need
the
to
act.
we don't need the
uh,
ruling class to shut off the pipeline. We don't need that. We don't because this is being done by the ruling class. It isn't worker. You're saying, oh, we need more of this. Well, no, it's not being done by the working class. It's being done by the capitalist
Well,
governments and the
I'm not
billionaires.
saying we need more of this. I'm saying I support this because when it happens, it's going to raise class consciousness. Another thing is
Okay.
I disagree ideologically with the petit bourgeois, right? Because the petit bourgeois are ultimately trying to make more money. But what I'm trying to do, the reason why I think it's good that they're blocking the ports physically with their trucks is because it disrupts global capital. But ideologically, they're wrong because they just want to make more money.
Oh, well, that's big. So
Because they want the ports to be
do
easy
you
to
actually
access so they can
support
make more money.
now? Would you say that you actually support the truckers in that case if
I
they're
support
stopping
them
this?
physically blocking it. I don't support these are working class truckers. Oh, I shed a tear. You know, Mary Antoinette, let them eat cake. These are working class truckers. Oh, because they're not. I just explained that they're all petit bourgeois, right?
Okay, so even well, I don't agree. I don't
I
agree
got to
with
do a
that. They're
little
all petty
fact checking
bourgeois,
on them. You know what I
but
mean?
let's go with that argument. I don't agree with it, but let's go with it. Despite them being, in your words, all petty bourgeois, you support what they're doing. It sounds like you don't agree with them ideologically, but action-wise and what they're doing physically, you support them.
Yes, I do. Action wise,
Oh,
yes.
okay. Well, that's a big change. I'm glad to hear that.
I
Okay.
didn't say they shouldn't block the ports. My argument was that they're not working class. That was my argument.
Okay, so you support them even though they're not working class, in
Yes,
your
I
words.
support what they're doing. I support what
So
they're doing.
you're basically acknowledging that there can be an alliance between the working class and sections of the middle class because you support what these people are doing, right? So you're kind of
No,
proving my
because if you
argument
try
here.
to ally with these people, as soon as they figured out that, well, basically, if you try to ally with these people and they stop blocking these ports, because let's say there is no COVID mandate or whatever, then you would be allied with these people. They would go away because now they can make money, right? You're not going to ally with these people because these people are there to make money. They're not there to disrupt global capital. That's
Well,
why you can't ally with them.
they still have an interest in fighting against the monopoly capitalists because at the end of the day they're still being squeezed by the big monopoly capitalists. So just because this is, you could say that about anything. You could say that about workers who are trying to start a union. Once they start a union, well, then they're not going to be interested in still fighting for socialism because they have their union. But no, that's
I don't believe that.
there's still the bigger contradictions that exist, which give the basis for fighting for something bigger.
What? And it's so funny. I have a petit bourgeois mentality. Yeah, you're literally fucking shilling for an entire line of petit bourgeois truck owners, by the way. But there's no hypocrisy in the CPI minds.
Well,
Like
I
I
don't
got
know.
the
This is
entire CPI here, and they can't understand that ideologically supporting an entire line of petit bourgeois truckers that want to keep capital flowing is probably not the Marxist thing to do. I support what they're doing physically, yeah.
so you support them. Okay, good.
No, I don't support them ideologically, like you are trying to frame it.
You support what they're
Because
doing, but you don't support what they're thinking.
yes,
Okay, yeah. Well, you're talking about CPI and all this stuff. Is there anything else? Because it's interesting. You talked about the truckers as your big dispute with CPI, but in fact, you actually sort of you agree, but don't agree fully with the truckers. Is there anything else you don't agree with CPI on?
yeah, I don't
You
agree
say
that
we're.
walking
What do you
around with
say?
the Soviet Union flag is going to do anything when most people think that the Holodomor was a genocide against Ukraine.
Well, you're
I
talking
don't think that's a
about.
really good look. I'm supposed to be,
Okay,
I remember a long time ago,
you're talking about a
Haas
conference
berated
that we
fellow
had.
traveler for
So
wearing a Mao hat, but now we're walking around playing the Soviet national anthem. How do you think a working class person is going to feel about the enemy of the U.S. being displayed proudly? Are they going
well,
to want to ally
that's
with
at a
us when they think that we killed
that's at a
their
conference
babies?
that we're doing, and it's to show.
Yeah, it's a public
We play.
conference.
Excuse me. We play both the U.S. national anthem, which is something you probably hate, also, but we also play the Soviet national anthem to show unity between the two countries, and that we are. You know, you say we're Putin apologists and all this stuff. Well, you notice we didn't play the Russian national anthem. We played the Soviet national anthem. It has the same melody, but the words are different, and that's because we support the legacy of the Soviet Union, and we also support friendship between the United States and Russia. And this isn't just some action on the street. This is our conference that we're doing. Pretty much everyone there agrees. Most people there probably already agree with us. So, and it's also to show, that for international viewers that see this, that there are Americans that do not believe the imperialist propaganda, and that we want to have a friendship with Russia and China and Venezuela
Yeah,
and Korea and all these
friendship
places.
with Russia.
Yeah, just like
Friendship with the
Venezuela
cat.
and Syria.
So French. Yeah. Anyway, friendship with the Just casually become friends with a capitalist global superpower that's a part of the UN Security Council.
You'd
Just,
prefer
just, just
war?
casually become friends with them.
You'd prefer war with them?
War? No, I would prefer revolutionary defeatism, but the CPI doesn't support revolutionary defeatism,
I don't think you know
apparently.
what revolutionary defeatism
I don't
means.
think you
Revolutionary
understand what
defeatism.
revolutionary. I don't think you support revolutionary defeatism because when I try
Okay,
to bring up the
well,
hypothetical about the
my
socialist
point is
military
you don't know
overthrowing
what it
Putin, you
means.
wouldn't
You don't
agree
know what
with
it
it.
means because
I just
what it
explained what it
means
meant.
is opposing your home country's imperialism. Opposing the foreign country's
You oppose the
imperialism
Russian
is
military
the
going
opposite
socialist.
of revolutionary defeatism because you're playing into social imperialism by going into the jingoism against the other country. Revolutionary defeatism is about opposing your home country's imperialism. You have it backwards.
I actually, I asked you, what if the Russian military went socialist and mutinied against Putin? And you said, well, of course I wouldn't support ousting Putin because you're a Putin shell. You guys are Putin shells. I can
No,
say that all day.
what I said clearly, and anyone could go back and play it, was that this is a purely hypothetical situation that doesn't exist. And if it did,
Yes, but
you'd be able
politics are
to give me
hypothetical, dude.
you'd be able to give me the specific names of these socialist organizations that are supposedly
Hypothetically,
going
we
to
could
do it,
build socialism.
but you can't.
Hypothetically, we'll have a global planned economy. Hypothetically, we'll go to communism. Like, what is this hypothetical excuse? Politics are all everything we've been talking about are hypotheticals. So the fact that you
No,
wouldn't
most of what we've
answer it
been
for
talking
20
about is
minutes
cold
shows your
hard facts,
apprehension
at
to
least on
condemn a
my side, at
capitalist
least.
government. It means welcoming the defeat of your own imperialists. Well, I welcome the defeat of both imperialist nations. I think if the Russian military mutinied and had a socialist revolution
I'm sorry, but
against
Russia's
Putin,
not
it would be a great
imperialist.
thing.
Russia's not imperialist, and in fact, they support the anti-imperialist forces around the world, and that's just the
Like
fact. I
Brezhnev.
mean, you claim to support the DPRK, right?
Yes.
You say DPRK is socialist. Well, they don't consider Russia imperialist at all. In fact, they call for friendship with
Okay,
Russia,
cool.
and the
I would
DPRK
disagree
fully
with the
supports
DPRK
Russia's
on
operation
that.
in Ukraine. North Korea fully
When did I
supports
become
Russia's operation in
a
Ukraine.
drone of the DPRK?
Well, my point is maybe you should learn something from them as a country that you respect as being socialist. Maybe they know what they're talking about.
Well, I would disagree with them because I could also point to China being socialist as well with their trade clauses that allow them to basically landlock and port lock a fucking African country if it doesn't pay its debt, which is usury, by the way.
I think you're getting your terms all mixed up here.
No, it's
But
not. What? How did I get my terms mixed up? China has a clause in its trade that allows it to landlock, meaning it's stuck in its own. Well, obviously, I'm not talking geographically. I mean, politically, they're landlocked. They're stuck within their own borders. They can't trade outside of their own borders, and they are blocked from trade. That's what I'm trying to say. China has a clause in their trade agreements with Africa where they can block African countries from naval and land trade because of unpaid debts. That's usury.
yeah, I'm not familiar with those specific cases, but I would imagine that has something to do with opposing because the United States has, AFRICOM and all the European colonizers have basically held on to their colonies through neocolonialism, and that's basically a way of trying to stave that off. But I don't know of any specific cases of where China has actually done that.
It is a clause that China has created when it trades with Africa, or specifically when it loans to Africa. It is a clause that China has when it loans to Africa.
Right. Well, I would go back to say that it probably has something to do with, while they haven't used that, it probably has something to do with the fact that the United States, AFRICOM is all over there, and the European colonizers are still all over there through their neo colonies. But I would like to try to switch back to getting back into patriotic socialism, because I would argue that there's a huge basis for patriotic socialism and American socialism. I like to call it American socialism. Sometimes we call it patriotic socialism or American socialism. But there's a long history of communists and socialists within the United States. Within the United States during the Civil War with Abraham Lincoln, you had communist generals in the Union Army, such as Joseph Wedemeyer and August Willich, who were, they were generals in the Union Army, and they were Marxists, they were communists, and furthermore, you have people probably be surprised to hear this, but the Pledge of Allegiance was actually written by a self-described socialist. Now he had his own ideas from the time period and stuff. But the point is, he identified as a socialist, and to a lot of right wingers who try to say that socialism is a foreign idea, it has nothing to do with this country. We have to do the Pledge of Allegiance to this country. If you don't do the Pledge of Allegiance, you're a traitor and all this stuff. Well, little did they know that it was an evil socialist, that self-described socialist, that wrote that.
Yeah, this is,
And
well, I mean, I've heard this like said in Caleb Maupin's script like 500 times. I don't know.
yeah,
Like, this
do
is
you
a
have a counter
generic talking
argument?
point against like liberal people in America who
Do you have a
think that
counter
socialism
argument?
is evil. Huh?
Do you have a counter argument to this, or should I go on?
Do
Because
I
there's
have a
more.
counter argument to a generic line that Caleb Maupin repeats every live stream to debunk basic liberalism about socialism being evil and never working? No, I don't. I don't understand
No,
what you're
that's
trying to
no, no,
argue
no.
here. What is your argument?
I think you're mixing it up. Well, my argument is what I just said at the start of this, which is
You
that
just said
there's
that.
a
Okay, so
strong basis. There's a
the
strong
writer of the Pledge of
basis
Allegiance is socialist.
for socialism in this country historically, and I'm giving these two examples, and some further examples of this. There's the whole history of the Communist Party in this country that fought for so many of the things that people in this country take for granted today,
Are
basic
you talking?
labor
Okay, so
rights.
you're trying to debate third worldism, right? You're trying to say
Yeah,
there's
and I'm also
revolutionary
talking
potential
about
in
the
the first world.
basis for the history, how there's a long history of communists and socialists within the
Right, yeah.
country.
That was smashed by FDR, who you guys love.
No, FDR was in a close
Just like
alliance
the
with the Soviet
anti-lynching
Union and
bill
Stalin.
smashed by FDR.
No, FDR was very close to the Communist Party. McCarthyism came
No, he wasn't.
after FDR died.
FDR literally the basis of social democracy, as we all know, is concessions. FDR is not close to fucking the communist. FDR was not close to the Communist Party. This is a Patsog myth that goes around often.
No,
Like, he was not close.
he actually was.
FDR
They
was
had
actually afraid of
communists.
the CPUSA.
They had
FDR actually
communists.
conceded to the CPUSA,
They
but he
well,
was not socialist. He
yes.
was afraid that he was going to be ousted. So,
Okay,
but if you
you're
concede
looking
to
at this in
someone,
a
you
very
are in opposition
simplistic
to them. You are not
way.
supporting with them.
I don't think you understand what we're arguing. We usually point out that FDR was a Bonapartist. He was a progressive Bonapartist, though. You could have a reactionary Bonapartist, which is often fascism, or a progressive Bonapartist. And FDR was a progressive Bonapartist, and he certainly was very close to the Communist Party USA. Communist Party USA supported him, and FDR supported them. You had communists staying over at the White House as a show of support when they were being attacked by.
Show of support. I mean, did you like FDR was afraid of revolution in America, which is why he did the New Deal. Also, people
Yeah, I
forget
would agree.
FDR was afraid of a white, educated, um, uprising against him. He was afraid of a white intellectual uprising against him. That's why the New Deal is racist as fuck, and that's also why he refused to ban or to
He
go with
was
the federal anti-lynching bill, because FDR wasn't even progressive. He wanted
Actually, he was
to
very
pacify
progressive.
a specific part of the working class that were intellectual and wanted to actually have revolution.
Well,
The Communist Party. That is why he
the
subsided
plot
to them.
against him. You also had the fascist coup attempt against him as well. So there was that as well. And you have to ask the question: why did the Soviet Union during Stalin support the Communist Party being in alliance with FDR? Well, it's because FDR was a progressive, and he was for an alliance with the Soviet Union against the fascist invaders, the fascist expansionists. And so he certainly
Yeah, okay.
was.
I mean, like the new.
And
Well,
we're not
sure.
saying that
Yeah, if you're a white
he was. You're
intellectual
trying to make a
CPUSA
caricature.
member who's threatening to overthrow um, who's threatening to overthrow FDR and cause major crisis in FDR's government. Yeah, but for
Well,
anyone
look,
else, see, that's the problem. Is how specifically intellectual centric and white centric and
no, not at all.
just centric it is. I
What
mean,
you don't
because
what you don't
for
understand
decades,
is that
socialism like that did not exist for people of color. It was specifically a concession to a specific group of people. It was not
actually
progressivism.
what you don't
Progressivism
actually
is
it was
seeing.
certainly progressive.
No,
Do
it
you?
wasn't. If
Okay,
I
so
put a
they shouldn't have
if I go to Hitler,
they shouldn't have
let me
brought
say an
any of the
analogy. Let me say an
policies that
analogy.
he did, right? They
Let
shouldn't
me
have
say an
implemented
analogy.
any of those policies.
Let me say an analogy. If I go to Hitler and I put a gun to Hitler's head and I say, you need to make gay marriage legal, and he says, fuck, don't shoot me. All right, I'll make it legal. Is that progressivism? Because that's what you're implying here. It's not progressivism. That's why he didn't give a shit about black people, because he was not progressive. He also didn't give a shit about Latinos like me. So I don't like FDR. Fuck FDR.
Well, you don't have to like FDR, but
Yeah,
the
but
point
apparently I
is,
do, because he
excuse
was
me,
anointed
you
by
don't have
Jesus
to like
Christ.
FDR, but the point is that he was in an alliance with the Communist Party and the Soviet Union. And we don't argue that he was a socialist. We argue that he was a Bonapartist, a progressive Bonapartist. And
He
what you
was not
said,
progressive.
that
I
he
just
was
explained why.
afraid of
I
a
just explained why
socialist
he's not
revolution. You're going to
progressive.
have to stop interrupting me and let me finish. Otherwise, this is a waste of
Well, it's already
time.
been going for 2:24, but finish your point.
So what our argument is that he was a progressive Bonapartist, and that you're saying like, oh, he was afraid of socialist revolution, all this stuff, as if this is some news. Yeah, we know that he wasn't. We don't argue that he was a communist or something. We know that there was a section of the ruling class that was scared of an actual socialist revolution, and so FDR made concessions to the working class, but at the same time it was very progressive because he was in an alliance with the Communist
He was
Party
so
and
allied
the
with them,
Soviet
he caused
Union.
them to
He could
fail.
have been in alliance with Nazi Germany and participated in invading the Soviet Union. He was not, and there was an attempted coup against him that could have happened to get the U.S. to be on the wrong side of World War II. So the fact that he was in an alliance with the Soviets and implemented progressive policies, even though obviously he was not good on certain things, obviously internment and other things,
Yeah,
he was
lynching
not he was
probably.
not good on. But
He
the
was,
point is,
his lynching. I
on the
think I
bigger
disagree
picture,
with
he
FDR's
was
take
very
on black
progressive.
people being not allowed to be lynched with the federal ban. You
So
know,
are you arguing that his policies, overall economic policies, did not heavily benefit working
that's
class
literally
black
not what I
people?
said. That's not what I said at all. My point is that you call FDR progressive.
Yeah.
FDR was not progressive. FDR was the reason why the CPUSA failed in the first place. And like I said earlier, FDR did not want to support um what the fuck, dude? Sorry. FDR did not want to support socialism like you guys seem to think, or even worker struggles or any of this shit like you guys claim. Okay, FDR was looking out for
Well, he actually did. Didn't he send out the
what the
U.S.
fuck?
military to support workers who were on strike against the thugs that the company had hired? Of course, he was very much on the side of the working class. Now, you could certainly argue that he did that because it was a concession to the working class, and he represented a section of the ruling class that was afraid of a socialist revolution. But the point is, it's just a fact in what he did.
Yeah. Well, it's a fact that FDR only did it because this section of the intellectual Communist Party were threatening him, which is why they appealed specific FDR. Like, you don't understand my point. FDR didn't say, "Oh, you know what? I'm so progressive. I feel like helping out black people in the New Deal." I mean, he didn't say that, right? He only helped out specifically the people that were going to overthrow him.
Didn't his
So anyway,
policies, my
I'd
point
like
though
to
is, didn't his
I'm trying to wrap
policies
this up.
help black people too? Working, of course, his policies helped very much working class black people as
Yeah,
well.
like shooting down a lynching bill, shooting down a federal bill that would ban lynching for Dixiecrats, right?
No, but his overall economic policies didn't help,
What's
did
the good
not
of an
benefit
economic
working
policy
class
if you're
black people.
being
Of course it
lynched?
did. What?
What's the good of an economic policy for black people if you're not being if you're being lynched, if you're not protected from lynching by federal law?
Yeah, as I said, a lot of things he did or didn't do in this case were not
So I
good.
guess he's not really progressive after all, right? Because he fucking agreed with
No,
he
overall
didn't touch lynching.
no, overall he certainly was. I'd say
Oh
if
yeah,
you're allied with the Soviet
certainly.
Union against fascism, that's pretty damn progressive. If you're
He
allied
was
with the
so
Communist Party,
progressive that
that's
he
pretty damn
only helped the
progressive.
people who were threatening to overthrow him. That's your thesis.
Was Marx a progressive? Did you see any of the
Yes, but
racist?
nobody was
Have you
threatening
hang on? Have
Marx
you ever
to
seen
make
any
his
of the
ideas.
racist commentary that Marx used? Oh, Marx is a racist white man,
Yeah,
and
of course.
he's
Like
not
200 fucking
progressive.
years apart, by
He's
the
not
way.
progressive, right? Marx is not a progressive because of the racial rhetoric he used, right? So let's get
I
rid of
mean, Marx
Marx.
didn't even, okay, Marx used the N word, but Marx wasn't even racist. Marx wanted to free the slaves. Marx would have opposed lynching black
What
people,
was his
whereas
position on
FDR was okay with
Mexico?
lynching black people because of the
What was
fucking
his
Dixiecrat.
position? What was his position on Mexico and the U.S. Mexican American War?
What was his position? Make a point.
He was in favor of the United States seizing territory for Mexico because he had a very Eurocentric, even you could say racist view. But does that discredit Marxism overall? Does that mean Marx is not a progressive because of that? No.
That doesn't even apply here, because when you call someone a progressive, that assumes that they are voluntarily doing progressive actions on their own will. It is not because they are being forced to. It's so stupid. Like, legally, I don't know,
You're getting
morally,
into the personal
however lens you want to. No, I'm not
motivations
getting anywhere. It's been 2 hours
in
and 30
this.
minutes. I gotta go.
Okay.
All
Well,
right. Well, nice talking to you then, for sure.
all right. Bye
All
bye.
right. See you. All right, guys. Uh, leftism today here. I'm hot as fuck. Uh, I hope this jumper cable will work. If not, I gotta go buy one. Anyway, see you guys. Peace.